welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We're here to talk about stuff, and Sean, it feels like we were just talking about stuff.
I mean, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but I talk about stuff all the time. These podcasts we do are just brief, hour-long, 2-hour, 3-hour-long windows into my life of always talking about stuff.
Yes, it really is a window onto our existence.
Yeah.
No. We just recorded an episode that you probably heard a couple days ago where we did some catch-up on things over the kind of winter break, Christmas period. We talked about things like the Hateful Eight and the Doctor Who Christmas special and some different movie news and fun things like that, games we've been playing. So if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that. And then today is our big annual tradition, our 2015 year in review, where we are going to present a bevy of top 10 lists, building up to our big tradition, which is our top 10 games list, which is always fun to do.
Yes.
Although in this case, Sean has a top 10 games list.
I do.
And I have a top 5, because I have a top 10 TV, top 10 movies, and sadly I was not able to do a top 10 for all three because I can only do so many things as a human being. But you have a top 10. That's enough. And I have some top 10s. But 2015, anything to start with saying, I mean, what kind of year was 2015? Was it a good year?
I think it was a very good year. When I had to sit down and actually make my top 10 video game list, which I did a week ago now, I wasn't sure how the process would go because I hadn't really thought about it. And I knew there were several games I played that I was like, these are great games, and any of these games would be a top game of the year in any other year. But I was I wasn't sure if I had played enough games to actually reasonably fill out a top 10 list. But when I sat down and actually listed everything out, it was I had a bunch of games, and actually narrowing it down and figuring out paring it down to only 10 games was really, really hard. And it's I was kind of surprised at that. I think this was the hardest top 10 game of the year list I've had to make since we've done the show.
And that's so interesting to me because that's what it was for me with TV and movies. Because I wasn't even necessarily thinking I would have time to do a list for either of those. But it was just I sat down and started doing the list. Like you say, if you just start by listing, what did I play this year? What did I watch this year? I'm oh, well, I can't not do it. Look at all that great stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough, but I got to do it. There's so much good stuff on here. So I think 2015 was a year that just snuck up on me. And I don't know if it was because I was out doing other stuff. I mean, that was a very busy year. Our last year of college. We had the podcast going strong and all that. But when you looked at the sum of it, it was oh, this was actually a really good year across all types of media.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll do some of my lists here. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly, and we can kind of talk about them because this is just mine exclusive, I guess. What's your top TV show of 2015, Sean?
I don't know. Has there been the TV show that we've really talked about much on the podcast, do you think?
It's kind of funny. We did talk about more than one show on the podcast this year. Because we did Doctor Who.
Yes.
We also did a full review of Jessica Jones and Daredevil.
True. And fuck, Daredevil was this year.
Daredevil was this year?
I completely forgot that.
Maybe it's on my list.
Huh.
We'll find out.
Daredevil was a pretty good TV show.
It was a pretty good TV show. We will find out if my list ever loads. It did. Okay. So we're going to go through some of these. And this should be fun. I know it's available on the site in text form. And actually for the TV, it's a long list because I kind of did a mini essay on each one, which I felt was justified because I haven't written about most of these shows. And this seemed like a fun time to do it. So I did a page on each one. But anyway, let's go ahead and go through some of these. Because I know some people don't read the site. They listen to the podcast and vice versa. So my number 10 show of the year, this was a heart over head decision. But I have to go with my heart. As the character on this show taught me, and this is Supergirl on CBS.
All right.
It is so good. It is so fun. It is the perfect comic book show. It has such a great sense of self. The characters are all so good. Melissa Benoist is as good a match of performer and character as any modern superhero. She is so perfect. The cast around her is great. You've got the awesome, wise version of Jimmy Olsen. You've got some of her friends who are created for the show. You've got some of the characters who like her adoptive sister and her boss over at the DEO, which is the Department of Extraterrestrial something. I'm not sure what the O stands for, because you would think it would be DEA, Extraterrestrial Affairs, but DEA is a different thing.
Yeah.
So it's DEO, and I don't remember what the O stands for. And it's really funny because the show has an opening every week where Supergirl tells you the story, and she always says, "I work with my sister at the DEO," and I'm thinking, this is for people who haven't seen the show before, and you're not telling them what the DEO is.
Yeah, you can't just. It's not like the FBI or the CIA or something.
They made it up for the show. So anyway,
they work for Johnny James Dio? What?
Anyway, it is so fun. I think there are definitely shows that are bigger artistic accomplishments that I left off the list for Supergirl.
Sure.
But look, at the end of the day, there were, I think, 9 episodes of Supergirl in 2015. And there were very few shows that I was as excited to watch every week. This airs on Monday nights, but it's a Tuesday night show for me because I get it on iTunes. And I was so excited every Tuesday to get home and be like, I get to watch Supergirl and have fun with it. And I know y'all think that sounds silly, but fuck you haven't watched it. It's great. If you're disappointed by Man of Steel, they make fun of it every week on this show. That
sounds like a pretty good show to me. I'm going to have to watch it at some point.
And look, I'm going to make a little spoiler for Supergirl. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I can make you, if you're a fan of DC, watch this show. And I've told you this, Sean, and you were convinced. This show has Martian Manhunter on it.
Yeah.
Martian fucking Manhunter.
That's Saul.
You're not going to see that in a DC movie.
No, you're definitely not. Like, they have gone basically on record and saying, that's never going to happen.
But you know what? You're going to see him on Supergirl, and you're going to see a lot of other good stuff, too. So that's my number 10. My number 9 is Better Call Saul on AMC. It's the prequel to Breaking Bad. I was shocked when I made the list that this went as low as it was.
Yeah, I remember you really loving this show.
It's phenomenal, and I loved Breaking Bad. I don't think Better Call Saul is something you can say it's a better show yet. Obviously, it's had 1 season versus Breaking Bad 6. But just in the short term, this is a show that, to my tastes, I like more. It is smaller scale, it is more intimate, and it addresses one of the issues that serialized dramatic television in the 2000s has always had, which is the focus issue of you have a story to tell and 13 weeks to tell it. How many side characters and shit are you going to add?
Yeah.
I think Breaking Bad ebbed and flowed in how effective it used its supporting cast. There are some seasons where it was kind of rock solid and some where, oh my god, Hank and Marie, I like you guys, but you have no story this year.
Yeah.
We're waiting for Hank to find out.
It's that TV effect of every time you cut to this subplot, you just just everything about you just goes down 2 degrees. It's like, ugh.
Yes. And Better Call Saul doesn't have that because it is so laser focused on Jimmy McGill, the main character who will become Saul Goodman, that it basically does not have B or C stories. It's basically just an A story every week.
Nice.
The only places they diverge are with the Jonathan Banks character, who is another returning player from Breaking Bad. And you can't complain, it's Jonathan Banks.
Yeah, that's cool.
And even when they do it, the big episode for him, it's just about him. Like, they cut away for a week and do a Jonathan Banks episode and then come back. And that's better than doing, half and half or something.
Yeah.
So it's very focused, and I think it is such a fascinating moral dilemma, because the moral dilemma in Breaking Bad is a guy who is pretty much always bad who is given license to be worse.
Yeah.
And that's what that show is about. It's about a guy becoming evil. And Better Call Saul is about this guy who is kind of a sleazy lawyer who wants to be a good guy, and the world keeps telling him to be bad. And we know it's Shakespearean tragedy. We know he will become a pretty awful human being because we've seen Breaking Bad. And he is... And you would never think the Saul Goodman of Breaking Bad could carry a show. But Bob Odenkirk is so good, and they've fleshed out this character so much. You watch him here, and it's Shakespearean tragedy because he is a good man with a good heart, and he is trying so hard, and you know he has to fail at every turn, because if he succeeded even once, he wouldn't become Saul Goodman.
Right.
And it is a fascinating story told beautifully over 10 weeks. If the show ended with this first season, I think it would be kind of perfect, but there are clearly many more narrative avenues for them to go down, and it still had the visual brilliance of Breaking Bad, and a lot of the great writing and side performances, and just some of the quirky things that Vince Gilligan does, and God bless him for it. So, Better Call Saul, great show. There were just 8 others that I like more, including number 8, which is Parks and Recreation.
Right.
I've talked about it enough, but this was the final season. Great final season. It was tough for me to know where to put it because it was the first show on this list that aired this year. It was way back in February and aired in 6 weeks because they just double aired it to get it off the air because NBC didn't want it anymore. But great final season, one of the all-time great sitcom final seasons. It's probably the second or third best season of Parks and Rec overall. A rebound year after a season 6 that was good but not great and kind of felt like the show was entering old age. But being on the verge of, the end, they definitely came back swinging, and that last season is everything that was good about Parks and Rec in one concentrated 13-episode batch. So, very good.
Cool.
Like The Flash, it made me cry. That's a callback to last week's episode, so go listen to that. Anyway, number 7 is Review on Comedy Central. Have you heard about this show?
I've heard you talk about it.
Okay.
I've not heard anyone else talk about it, though.
Review is such a good show, and it's one of several shows on this list, and in 2015 as a whole, that had this great first season in 2014. And you were thinking, this is really good, solid first season, and it's so extreme in so many ways, I don't know where they're going to go from here. And there are a couple other shows on this list like that. But, because Review, the premise, if you don't know, it's on Comedy Central. It stars Andy Daly as Forrest McNeil, who is a reviewer of life. So he will, every week, he will take suggestions and do them and review them. So in the first season, he did things like getting addicted to cocaine and divorcing his wife, who he loved, and going into space, and just crazy things like that, and slowly destroyed his life. And you're thinking, well, season 1 involved him killing his father-in-law in space. Where are they going to go from there? Well, review season 2 opens with a segment where he gets shot, goes to the hospital, and is in physical therapy for 6 months, falls in love with his nurse, and then for the show blackmails her until she goes crazy and shoots him again. That's episode 1 of Review Season 2, and it is the tamest episode of Review Season 2.
Nice.
That show went off the charts, and it was this unique viewing experience this year where every week you know they're probably going to one-up themselves because they keep doing it, but you're thinking, I don't know how. Episode 4 of 10 includes a massacre he's involved in, and you just watch it with your hand over your mouth. You're laughing at some of it, but mostly you're just horrified because you don't know where this is going to go. And in the midst of it, they tell this great serialized story about this guy who is fundamentally self-destructive and destructive to other people, and it is the ultimate send up to the modern male anti-hero myth on American TV, but also kind of the great deconstruction of it, and just where they go with it by the end of the season, which I can't even... It's one of 2 series this year that ended with a Sherlock Holmes homage and was perfect, and it's one of 2 also because of that this is such a good ending. I know they're doing a 3rd season. They don't have to. It's so perfect. But then again, I thought they couldn't one-up themselves after season 1, and they did big time. So I trust these guys. I look forward to season 3, although I, again, don't know where they can go from here beyond he goes and lives in outer space. I don't know. It's crazy. But Review is a great show. I don't know if it's on Hulu or not. It is while it airs. But if you can find it and catch up on it, each season is 10 episodes apiece, and they're short, 20-minute episodes. And they're kind of good to binge because you just get the horror out of the way. And great show.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Number 6 is Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Another show that debuted in 2014. Was instantly great. And then for 2015, I wouldn't say it made a leap or anything, but John Oliver, I think, got a little bolder in the topics he was taking on. I think he went a little further with the kind of jokes he was telling, and just the enthusiasm that permeates that show became even more all-enveloping. And they tackled a lot of very interesting and important stories this year. The big one was he went to Russia and interviewed Edward Snowden, which is a great piece of journalism above all else. But they also talked about the American territories around the world, the Canadian elections, FIFA scandals, seed faith, a recurring series of reports on the United States legal system that was just heartbreaking to watch. And every week he kind of just explored some of the darkest corners of our world, but in a way that was constantly funny and in some ways even life-affirming. And there's a creativity to this show mixed with real journalistic ethics and process that is just superior. It is the next evolution of The Daily Show. If The Daily Show was the evolution of Weekend Update from SNL and the better version of that, this is the better version of The Daily Show. And the sting of Jon Stewart leaving us this year, he didn't die. Loft left TV. That's it. And that's something joke Jon Stewart kept making, is that everyone talked like he died. He's still around. Yeah. But anyway, he's even been on The Daily Show again since then. But anyway, that sting of The Daily Show ending was lessened by having Last Week Tonight be around and being as consistently great as it is. And yeah, it's a tough show to know where to rank because obviously
it's so different.
Yeah, but it's a TV show on TV this year, so worth ranking it as one of the best.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted you to know, number 5, 4, 3, and 2 were in a dead tie, and I kept moving them around, and I didn't know what to do. So this is the ranking, and I feel good about it, but it took forever to arrive at this. So number 5 was Hannibal on NBC. I fucking love Hannibal. Y'all know that. Season 3, in some ways, was a more inconsistent season because they just went all in on their avant-garde shit, and I happen to love that. I understand if it went too far for you, but at the same time, I think this was the ultimate version of what the show always was, and I like how far up its own ass it went this year.
Right.
And I think some people are ignoring that the first half of this season is divided into 2 clear halves. Half happens in Italy, where Hannibal's on the run, and then half is an adaptation of Red Dragon, the book. And I think people ignore that the total esoteric nature of that first half is a clear contrast to the second half, which is less esoteric and is novelistic because it is adapting the book. And I think in concert, those two work very well together. It brings the story of Will Graham to a very interesting close. This is the final season, because it was canceled, not because they chose to, but at the same time, I'm not sure what they were planning with season 4 because it's a pretty fucking definitive ending and a pretty great ending. And just you look at the things they did this season, how far they went with those avant-garde stylings. Just there has never been an American TV show this visually interesting. And I don't know if there's been a season of American TV as visually interesting as this. And then you add on the great performances by Hugh Dancy and Mads Mikkelsen, which were as good as ever here. And Hugh Dancy, yes, was pretty much a somnambulist for the first half of the season. But that was an intentional thing coming out of last season. And then in the second half, he's kind of back to being himself. But does he want to be back to being himself? And it's a question, and it's very interesting. And Mads Mikkelsen is terrifying as always and very funny. This is a black comedy at heart and a very good one. And then you added Richard Armitage from The Hobbit, who decided for his first post-Hobbit role to do a part as a serial killer on Hannibal where he is mostly nude the entire time. He's crazy. He has a lisp. He has a physical deformity, all these things. And he's fantastic. And just, he was great in The Hobbit, and this proves that that's no fluke. He is a really good actor. And yeah, Hannibal, if you have not seen it yet, all 3 seasons are out there, and it makes just a great 3-season journey. Don't be sad that it got canceled. I think this was its time. It's 3 great seasons, went out on top. No shame in that.
Yeah, no.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's way worse to have a show just go on forever and do just devolve into nonsense. Yeah. It's much better to just have it be authoritative and just 3 solid seasons, and if the best you can hope is that when it ends on a really strong note.
Yes, and I think people years from now would look at it and say they planned on 3, right? Because that's a pretty clear beginning, middle, and end for that show, and so good. So yeah, number 4 was Fargo on FX. Again, a show, great first season last year in 2014, where they adapted the Coen Brothers movie. They didn't adapt it, but they made a new show in that universe. It sounded like an impossible act of ego to say we're going to do the Coen Brothers, but Noah Hawley and his team knew what they were doing, and that first season is fantastic. And you know what? The second season was even better. They went back to the 70s. They tripled the cast. It's a much bigger cast, much more complex story, and for once more proved to be more and not less. And just a great ensemble narrative, a great crime drama, a great story, a great American story, a great family drama, all these things. And it was funny and fun as hell, so stylish, so interesting. Ended on a very quiet note, but on a very proper note, I think, and had some incredible moments of bombast in the middle. Just, if you like the Coen Brothers, you would love Fargo, but at the same time, this season, I think the show really came into its own as something beyond Coen Brothers homage. And I look forward to see where they go from here. It's something where you would say every year, I don't know how they can do this for 2 years, don't know how they can do it for 3, but the second season was even better than the first. So again, I trust Noah Hawley and his team, and I look forward to seeing what they do next year. It, if nothing else, is a showcase for so many great actors. This was the best ensemble on American TV this year. Just fantastic. So
nice.
Number 3 is The Leftovers on HBO. The Leftovers is a show I very much loved in its first season, which was also in 2014. It was very much a trend this year.
Yeah.
Very tough show to watch, very heavily emotional show, and a show that rubbed some people the wrong way. But I think everyone loved the second season. The second season of The Leftovers is just a superior work of art. It is Damon Lindelof, who did Lost. This is him at his best. This is the best vehicle he's ever had for his particular interests in spirituality and mortality and kinship and created families and mystery and what that means to us when things are unexplained. And the second season of The Leftovers had all of that the first season had and more. They moved the action from New York to Texas and created this whole new kind of sci-fi world for the show to go on. It was so fascinating. They reworked the cast, added some new people, cut some people, kept some old people around. Worked so well, and even there's so many great performances in this season this year, including Chris Eccleston from Doctor Who, who went full frontal this season, and also was just amazing as always.
Did you get a good look at his sonic screwdriver?
We very much did.
Nice.
And and he's great. Carrie Coon is great. Liv Tyler has never been better than she is in The Leftovers season 2. Liv Tyler is a very kind of quiet, reserved actress who you're never sure if she's effective or just kind of bland.
Right, yeah.
She's terrifying in The Leftovers season 2. She basically plays the villain this year. Terrifying. A great performance from her. And still the best to me was Justin Theroux, who was the main character last year, main character this year, but the season had such a laser focus on his arc of basically insanity. And I would say he would be Now that you've got people like John Hamm and Bryan Cranston out of the Emmy field, he absolutely should be taking their place. He is so great on this show. And the season built to this, I think it was the 8th or 9th episode called International Assassin, which all I'll say is it's a trip to the afterlife unlike any you've ever seen, and the most Damon Lindelof-y thing Damon Lindelof has ever written, and God bless him for it. And then the finale hit me even harder, and it got as high on the list as it did because there is a sense of cumulative impact to The Leftovers Season 2. The last 25 minutes of that season worked me over as hard as anything this year. Great show.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, had a shitty theme song the first year, and they didn't just be obstinate about it and keep it around. They completely redid the theme song. Way better. More shows, like when that doesn't work, they should be willing to do that.
They should just do the anime thing where you just change it every 12 episodes. It's
well,
just like, fuck it, man.
Totally. I mean, The Leftovers is a show that is going to end next year. They said they're going to do 3 and done. I hope they do a different theme song next year just so we have a consistent 1, 2, 3. But anyway. Number 2 is Mad Men. You've read my Mad Men articles. You've heard me talk about Mad Men. At the end of the day, I said to myself, all right, it's tough to know where to rank Mad Men because they only aired 7 episodes this year.
Right.
And it was the second half of an overall season. This still felt like its own arc, but it is a small chunk of TV. Tough to know where to rank that among bigger, fuller seasons like The Leftovers Season 2, which has a clear, big beginning, middle, end arc. Mad Men, not so much, in part because Mad Men just isn't that kind of show. But this was a great ending to what is my favorite of American TV shows. And it's the show it's one of 2 shows I covered regularly this year. And I covered them regularly not out of habit necessarily, but because they really deserved it. And I think that tells me where they had to go on the list.
Right.
So, Mad Men number 2. The image on the site is that great image of Peggy walking into the office with the cigarette in her mouth and the octopus porn painting. You have to see the show to get it.
All right.
That alone. I mean, it's got to be.
I've seen my fair share of octopus porn paintings. Like, you don't need to fucking talk to me about this shit.
It's Mad Men. It had a perfect ending. What more can you say? But none of
Jonathan, if Mad Men was your number 2, then what could possibly be your number 1?
It's all it could ever be, and that's what I said when I wrote about it. It's Doctor Who, and I really had to stress this. This is not a heart over head pick. This is not, I like sci-fi shows, so I'm going Doctor Who. This is not, I'm being cool and edgy because no one else is picking the British sci-fi show. No, Doctor Who was the best show this year, and if you're not at least considering it in your top 20, you either didn't watch it or frankly you're being obstinate because what Stephen Moffat and company achieved on Doctor Who this year was just transcendent in every way. You have a season with 11 out of 12 major hits. 12 out of 13 if we're going to count the Husbands of River song, which I had not seen when I wrote this, obviously. But so we'll go just say 11 out of 12 for Series 9 proper. And that alone is a level of quality that is extraordinary for Doctor Who and for TV, episodic TV in general.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. You have the 2 best performances of 2015, I think, easily in Jenna Coleman and Peter Capaldi, and in them together specifically.
Yeah.
You have some of the best direction. You have some of the best music. You have the best episode of TV this year in Heaven Sent. And even if you don't agree with me on that, it's definitely one of the best directed, best shot, best scored, and you can say best that for acted. A lot of, best acted, most ambitious and out there episodes. And then across all of that, you have an actual arc going on here that is so much more subtle and intelligent than Doctor Who usually is, and than television in general, frankly, is, even in this golden era of television we live in. There was an emotional impact to this season of Doctor Who that built very steadily and very subtly and very understatedly for a long time, and just got better and better and better. And those last couple episodes were a complete and total knockout, and there was nothing more in movies, TV, games, whatever, I enjoyed watching and engaging with more this year than Doctor Who. I think it was a huge artistic accomplishment, and if that's still not enough of an explanation for you, we have 12 other podcasts where we talked about it in depth.
Fucking men.
Yeah.
Yeah. I concur.
And it's so satisfying because I don't make a TV top 10 list every year. There are years Doctor Who would be on it. There are years it wouldn't be. Like 2 years ago, Series 7 would not have been on there. Series 8 would have been, but I think on the bottom half of the list. And then this year, it just totally number one. Like, no, not even a sliver of a doubt. It's just, there's just, again, Heaven Sent alone, I think, gets it there because that's an all-time great TV episode. But I think some of these other ones, I think that International Assassin episode I mentioned is a pretty big all-timer for HBO. But it's the overall impact of Doctor Who, that it had that many great episodes, and it was this cumulative punch. So, great season of Doctor Who.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, then again, like, if anyone doubts that, just watch Heaven Sent.
Yes.
Like, I rewatched that again, like, a week ago. God damn it, that episode is so good.
So good.
It's unbelievable.
It's absolutely unbelievable and good enough. I actually had some gift cards for Christmas, and I got the Series 8 Blu-ray set, which is cool because they have all the discs are done like the clock from the opening.
Oh, nice.
Love that. Anyway, and I'm excited to get the Series 9 set just because that's a season good enough that I want it on physical media.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah. And the Series 9 set, I actually like what they're doing. It'll have Last Christmas on it, but they're also going to throw on Husbands of River Song.
That's nice.
Which they don't normally do, but it makes sense because otherwise that one would just be in the ether for a while.
Yeah.
Until you got to Series 10. So yeah. Anyway, let's do some movies.
Okay.
I'm going to breeze through some of these quick until we get to the top 10 because I did a top 20 list in 2 parts. So 20 was Cesario. That's the Denis Villeneuve movie about the drug trade in Mexico. Very intense. Left me a little cold, but man, Roger Deakins is a hell of a cinematographer, and sometimes that's enough. So, number 19, Crimson Peak. Have you seen this yet?
No, I still haven't.
You should see this movie.
I should.
It's tailor-made for you.
I know.
I could say a lot about Crimson Peak. I will say this. I tried to get Jessica Chastain nominated for Best Supporting Actress in our Denver Film Critics Society nominations, and I couldn't do it, and I'm a little sad about that, because she is hamming it up so gloriously in this movie. Nice. And it's got great production design and writing and all that. Anyway, number 18 was the Peanuts movie. I think I talked about that on the show.
Yes, you did,
Yeah, really good, gentle, awesome kids movie, and when you have a kids movie that actually feels like it respects the audience and has something good to say, we should celebrate that.
I agree.
Number 17, Bridge of Spies, Steven Spielberg. You know, Steven Spielberg can make a miss every once in a while. You've got Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or War Horse to prove that. But then you've also got Lincoln and Adventures of Tintin and now Bridge of Spies. And he's still got it. In some ways, he's got it harder than ever. This is a really great espionage movie. It takes too long to end, but that's every Steven Spielberg movie. Otherwise, it's just kind of so good. Anyway, number 16 is Trainwreck, which is the Amy Schumer comedy. Amy Schumer had her best season yet on Inside Amy Schumer, the Comedy Central show, and then decided to follow that up with a really, really great cinematic comedy directed by Judd Apatow. I think it's the best thing Judd Apatow's ever directed, and just a very good comedy that is very funny, but also very poignant and hard-hitting. So there's that. Number 15, one of my only foreign films on the list. I didn't get to see a lot of foreign cinema this year, but this is When Marnie Was There, the final film by Studio Ghibli. Of course, I'm going to have a Studio Ghibli film on here if they would release one. But this one's really good, and if this is the final film they ever make, it was an interesting look at what the future could have been. It's the only one they ever made that did not have direct input from Isao Takahata or Hayao Miyazaki. But it was very good, and I think it's too bad they won't be around to enable these voices in the future. But at the same time, they had their day in the sun. They really were there for Takahata and Miyazaki. It's their company. You know, Charlie Chaplin's production studio doesn't exist anymore either. But this was a really good, really gentle, nice final film. It's in the vein of their more literary adaptations, but I love those too. And, you know, nothing like a good Ghibli film.
Yeah.
Number 14 is Spotlight, which you've probably heard of.
Yep.
That's the journalism film, kind of an ode to the final days of investigative journalism. It's also about corruption in the Catholic Church. And it's the kind of subtle, workmanlike movie that does not rely on histrionics, but you will become pretty histrionic watching it because you're going to learn a lot of horrible things about the Catholic Church that you probably knew but didn't have shoved in your face that way.
Right.
And it's with a great cast: Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Mark Ruffalo, and many, many more doing some of their best work. Masanobu Takeyanagi, one of my favorite modern cinematographers, shot this, and it looks better than a movie like this probably has any right to be. So, very good movie. It's probably one of the favorites to win at the Oscars this year, and it won't make me angry, which is good, because some Oscar winners make me angry. This one will not. It's a good movie.
Cool.
That's sometimes all you can ask for.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. 13 is Ex Machina. Have you seen this?
No, I know I should.
You would love this. This is adult science fiction. It's like Philip K. Dick. It's like Isaac Asimov. It's imaginative, but grounded in reality and grounded in big human ideas. And it is a really beautifully shot movie, a beautifully acted movie, and a very just interesting chamber piece. Very evocative, and has that slight lunatic edge that all good sci-fi needs.
Yeah.
Where there's something you're like, the person who wrote this, Alex Garland, is like 25% crazy.
Yeah.
And I like that. That's what you gotta have. You don't want to overwhelm, but you want it to be there.
Yeah.
Number 12 is one I actually just saw this last weekend. It's Carol. by Todd Haynes. It's an adaptation of a Patricia Highsmith novel starring Rooney Mara and Cate Blanchett as two women who fall in love in an era when they're not supposed to, but not in like the Brokeback Mountain way or something where it's very hyper emotional and sad. It's a very small scale movie, very beautiful movie shot by Ed Lockman, just fucking gorgeous cinematography. Even more than Hateful Eight, this is one I would love to actually see on 35 because that's how it was shot, and even digitally you can very well much tell. It looks so textured and lifelike. But so well acted, so well written. I think it's small scale, but it works so well. And if you like this kind of adult drama, I mean, it's top notch. Go see it. And finally, 11, another one you should see. Have you seen What We Do in the Shadows?
No.
What We Do in the Shadows, have you heard of it?
No.
Okay. I might have talked about it on the podcast, I forget. It is made by half of the team that did Flight of the Conchords, Jermaine Clement, and his filmmaking partner, Taika Waititi, who has been hired to do Thor Ragnarok, which you can... there's nothing overt in What We Do in the Shadows that would suggest that, because it's a small-scale comedy mockumentary about vampires living in New Zealand. But it has such a heart and voice. That's why you hire him to do a Marvel movie, because this movie has so much heart and so much voice and so much creativity. At the end of the day, that's what you need to make a big-scale movie, too. And this movie, just pound for pound, is the funniest film released in 2015. It is ultra committed to its mockumentary thing, where it is a documentary through and through, but about something zany and silly. It's vampires, and they are classical vampires in the Bram Stoker sense. They sleep in their coffins, and they can turn into bats.
Nice.
And they can't encounter sunlight, and all that good stuff. And they make so many good jokes about it, and it is also just this kind of charming character piece. And just, God, it is such a good comedy. I kind of wish I had put it on the main top 10, but oh well, it's at number 11 for now. It's really good.
Number 11's, there's no shame in that.
No shame in that. My number 10, none of you have heard of this, and that's okay. It's called Queen of Earth. It's a indie film that came out this year, directed by a guy named Alex Ross Perry. I've not seen his work before, but I might have to go check some of it out. Young director. Stars Elizabeth Moss from Mad Men and Catherine Waterston, who you might know from Inherent Vice. And it's this kind of two-hander in the vein of like a 70s psychodrama like Persona, not the game, the Ingmar Bergman movie.
Yeah.
But I think it's got a voice that is its own. It is a small movie. It is a slight movie, but it is in its own way just as good a film about anger and resentment as The Hateful Eight is, just in a more modern, down-to-earth context. It's about this woman who undergoes a series of personal traumas. She heads to a lake house where her best friend, played by Catherine Waterston, lives, and just saying that, I'm giving a much more clear sense of the story's plot than the movie will. It really is non-narrative. It's just a series of scenes in the lives of these women, some flashbacks, some in the present, all dark and fucked up, and leading to this outburst the Elizabeth Moss character has that single-handedly got it on this list because it is the most beautifully cathartic and crazy moment I saw in film this year. Just bitter anger and resentment towards another person who is a douchebag, and some days you need that.
Yeah.
You really do. So, good movie. Also shot on 16mm and looks gorgeous, and 16mm, 70 looks good, 35 looks good. I have seen more 16mm prints than I could literally count in film school, and that is just my favorite film stock by default now. So when I see it, I go bananas for it. Anyway, I like it. Number 9 was The Hateful Eight. We just talked about it. It's good. Go see it. It has some flaws, but that's okay. Still good enough to
Every
be in the top
movie
10.
has some flaws.
Yes, it's okay. Number 8 is Room. This is a drama. Have you heard of Room?
No.
It's a awards player this year, but a very deserving one. It's a story that could be so oppressively dark because it is about a young boy and his mom. He's been born and raised in a small shed where his mother has been kidnapped and is kept by a sick dude who is raping her, obviously. So
it's a fun family film.
No. It's the kind of story we hear in the news every once in a while. It's obviously so hard to even fathom. And what this movie does is it is a masterclass in cinematic point of view, which is something that is so tough to do. To do POV in cinema and express that is so tough, and so many filmmakers are not good at it. But Lenny Abrahamson, who directed this, it is all told from the point of view of the child who is 5. And because of that, it is a story of discovery and of redemption and of life and vitality. and it finds light in the darkness while not negating the darkness. It is a little too twee for my tastes here and there, but it could have been so much more twee, and it is ultimately a very, I feel, honest and emotional film. Brie Larson plays the mother, and I love Brie Larson, and she is so good in this. She is so going to win an Oscar for this. Literally every scene she has, I can see being like her Oscar reel scene.
Right.
So, yeah, I think she's going to win this one, and she'll deserve it, but it's about more than her, and it is a very, very good movie. Number 7 is one I don't think you're going to see on anyone else's top 10 list, but had to be on mine. This is The Walk, the Robert Zemeckis movie. None of you watched this year, and you should have, because the story of Philippe Petit, as told in Man on Wire, the documentary from 2008, is a great true story. One of the all-time great true stories, I feel like. And this was the fictionalized version of it, the dramatized version, and it's so much fun. It has such a big heart, and when you actually get to the scene where we do the walk across the World Trade Centers, it is fantastic. It is the special effects achievement of 2015, and I think this movie gives a different perspective than you got in Man on Wire, but an equally valid and an equally important one. It's the experiential version of this great story, and I think there's value in that, and I think it's a very well-done version of it. It's so much better than it needed to be. I would have loved this movie either way because I am a nerd for this story, but it's more than that. And if you can, if Joseph Gordon-Levitt's French accent distracts you, I don't know what to say, because it's a glorious, silly French accent, and if you've ever heard Philippe Petit, he has a silly French accent. I don't know what to say. He's a larger-than-life character. This is a larger-than-life movie. This is the storybook version, and it kind of breaks my heart that it flopped at the box office as hard as a movie can possibly flop.
Right. Because
I can imagine, kids and families loving this, and it being just such an inspiring story. So yeah. Number 6 is Brooklyn, which is another awards player and a very deserving one. Actually, the awards movies this year are surprisingly good. I don't have to be looking at them and being ashamed at them.
Right.
Brooklyn stars... Okay, I don't know how to say her name. I'm sorry. It's spelled Saoirse Ronan. We know who she is.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone knows how to pronounce her name. It's Irish. I really don't understand
I suspect she understands how to pronounce her name.
I think it's...
Her family probably does as well.
I looked it up the other day and I've already forgotten. It's something like Saoirse or something. But anyway, she gives... Sorry. Sean, you would like this movie because you are invested in the plight of the Irish in America.
I am, yes.
Because you are the descendant of Irish immigrants.
Yes.
And this is about Irish immigrants in the 1950s. So kind of past that period where they're being horribly abused by Americans.
Sure, like blatantly so.
Blatantly so, but where they have a settled diaspora, and they have a culture, but they are still kind of separated. But it's really about this one young woman's journey from Ireland to the United States to find herself. And I think Miss Ronan, I think I know how to pronounce her last name, gives to me the best cinematic performance of the year. It is a beautiful character creation. The film so subtly builds a character where she has no sense of who she is or what she wants to be at the end, and then you get to the end of the movie, and without even knowing it, she has become this strong, three-dimensional character. And that is another one of those things in cinema that is so hard to do and to convey. But it is a gentle movie and a beautiful movie and a great American story about immigration. And it's a lot of glorious Irish accents. What more can you want than that?
Not much.
Not much. Number 5, Creed. Fuck yeah. If you haven't seen Creed, what are you even doing with your life? Have you seen Creed?
No, I'm recording podcasts. That's what I'm doing with my life.
You gotta go see Creed. It's so good.
There's a lot of stuff I need to do. At some point, I would very much like to see Creed because I've seen the other Rocky movies.
It's so good. I've said my piece on it. It is fantastic. And boy, it builds to one of the biggest emotional punches of the year, and that's why it's on here.
Did you do that as a pun?
Did not mean to.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were being literal when you said that, or if you were being figurative and weren't intending a pun, or if you were being figurative and did intend a pun.
Sean, Creed is a knockout. But I've seen that on enough fucking posters. There are enough critics who have enough of a lack of self-respect that they wrote that.
Yeah.
Oh well. Number 4 is Steve Jobs. I run hot and cold on Aaron Sorkin in general, but I think this is the best thing he's ever written. It is a cinematic stage play that is so gleefully unattached to the details of history that it manages to bring this legendary modern figure to life in a way that nothing else really can. It is this brilliant 3-act structure where you have 3 extended 40-minute sequences that take place before a product launch in 84, 88, and 98. And of course the scenes we're watching didn't literally take place. but they took place emotionally. They are Steve Jobs basically having dialogues with himself through other people, and it paints an unflattering portrait of Steve Jobs in other ways, but by showing him in all these complexities and really trying to dive into that, I think it paints a very intensely human portrait, and I think the people who are saying it's just a hatchet job or that it's unattached to history or all these things are so missing the point of the movie. It's like if you read a Shakespeare history play like Henry V, and you're like, he didn't get the point of Henry V. Well, no, he didn't give you a history lesson. There's a difference. And Steve Jobs is Shakespearean, and it is, I think it's so savvy in the way it's almost like a dream sequence, but it's also so intense. I just rewatched it the other night because my brother hadn't seen it. It is so intense. It is so beautifully shot. You go from 16 millimeter to 35 to digital in this very interesting evolution. It's got so many great performances, but Michael Fassbender, man, this is why I'm excited for Assassin's Creed. He is a great, great actor. And is he trying to look or sound like Steve Jobs? No, because he's much taller and he's Irish. It's not going to happen. Right. But he's a great actor, and that's what you need for this. And if you have any interest in Steve Jobs or just good drama in general, this movie is worth it. It is fantastic. Go see it. Let's see. Number 3 was Inside Out. I've talked about Inside Out before on the podcast. Yep. Pixar movie. Great Pixar movie. Maybe the best Pixar movie. That's enough for me. Pixar also released their worst movie this year in The Good Dinosaur. Thank God we got Inside Out to even that one out.
To balance it a bit.
Yes. Yeah. So Inside Out, very, very good. Number 2, Mad Max, Fury Road. This is where I have to say things like, remember, this is my top 10 list. It's not me saying objectively I think these are the best films of the year.
No, because if you were saying that, Mad Max Fury Road would be the number 1.
And that's what I said in my post right here.
Okay.
It would
be.
Good. I think this is
I'm glad we're on the same page.
This is the filmmaking achievement of 2015. It is one of the grand filmmaking achievements of the last few years. Every moment of it is mind-boggling that George Miller pulled this off, but it's more than just a technical accomplishment. It is a great story, very well told, and it should teach everyone in Hollywood how you do this thing that we call the blockbuster and the action movie.
Yeah.
And just, there was one more movie that emotionally connected with me more, but Mad Max, damn. Hot damn.
I think that's all you really need to say.
Yes. And number 1 for me was Star Wars The Force Awakens. I didn't know what to do with Star Wars, because I love this movie. But I also saw it, obviously, in the haze of excitement and fandom. So I went to see it again with my family again. My mom hadn't seen it, and my brother and I had, so but we wanted to see it again. So we finally saw it again, and there was no doubt for me after seeing it again. When I was going to the theater for the second time, I'm like, this will be on my top 10. It's either going to be number 1 or number 10, and I'm not sure if it's going to land anywhere in the middle. But it's number 1. It's not the best movie of the year. I recognize that. I think it is such a smart resurrection of Star Wars. I think it is so fun. I think it is so packed with good characters and things I love about it. I mean, I realized the second time watching it, Rey, who I love that character, she's a Miyazaki heroine, 100%. Yeah. I mean, her introduction is the opening scene to Nazca, which is a movie I love. And throughout, that's what she is. And her and Finn are a Miyazaki couple in that it's not romantic, but they have this connection that is interesting. And it works on all these demographics because it is so good at just building characters. And I think it is exciting, and it's beautifully shot. And I watched that movie, and I felt the magic of cinema in a way I didn't watching anything else this year. Because this was a year where I often felt, not because of the movies coming out, but because of where I was in my life, a little burned out. Because that's what happens when you write about movies for 11 years and are finishing a degree where you watched way too many movies.
Yeah.
And Star Wars felt like an awakening for me as well as for the Star Wars universe in general. So,
did you use that as a pun? Was that an intentional pun? The awakening?
It was an intentional kind of thematic connection.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I loved this movie, and my gauge for this sort of thing, and I think you would probably agree with this too, is that when I'm making these lists, my number 1 is what experience am I going to treasure from this year? It's like a time capsule.
Yeah.
What do I think going forward is the one that meant the most to me? And that doesn't always mean it's the best. Sometimes I think it is. Last year, Inherent Vice is a movie that makes me giggle like a madman. I love it to death. I also think it was the best movie by far that came out last year. That doesn't always line up that way. This year, it didn't for me. I would say Mad Max is that big filmmaking achievement. But in terms of the movie, I feel like I'm going to carry with me, it was The Force Awakens. So, yeah, and you all loved it too. So, there you go.
Well, everyone saw it, at least.
Yeah.
Like,
A lot of
my
people
God, everyone saw it 5 times.
Everyone saw it 5 times. I do. At some point, the math is going to have to come in of like, all right, everyone in America has seen it once.
Yeah.
We're getting to the point where everyone's seeing it twice. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I had, my tickets for opening night weeks in advance, and then it took me 2.5 more weeks to see it again, mainly because I couldn't get tickets.
Right.
It's nuts. Anyway, so that's my top 20 movies and TV shows and everything. So, Sean, you saw a couple of those.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really love Mad Max.
Great fucking movie.
Mad Max is a really, really, really good movie.
It's a great movie, and I hope I don't get any notes like, you only put it at number 2, you hate Mad Max. That's not what I'm saying. You get it, right?
Yes, no, okay. I totally understand. But I feel like Mad Max Fury Road is like the movie that comes out this year that like obviously is not going to win like Best Picture at the Oscars because it's Mad Max.
It's going to get nominated.
It's going to get nominated, but it's never going to win. But it's going to be the movie from this year that like has that impact like on every spectrum in terms of like filmmaking and in culture that like so few movies even ever really approach.
It absolutely will. And the thing is though, up until today with the Writers Guild Awards, where Mad Max was ineligible because George Miller is not a member of the Writers Guild, Mad Max was one of only 2 movies that had been nominated at every professional awards ceremony. One of only 2, that and The Revenant. And The Revenant broke its streak with the WGA too. So it's got a huge base of support. I don't think it'll win Best Picture. It is very possible it could win Best Director, and to me that's the award it needs most.
Sure,
because George Miller fucking owned it this year. I mean, when I put in my DFCS nominations, he was my number 1, and I was really, and we luckily nominated him, and I think he might have the base of support to win our award, which would be great, because I don't know how you could even consider anything else. Just as a directorial achievement, that is what we're talking about.
Yeah, without a doubt. But it is like, I just feel like you watch Mad Max Fury Road and you're like, man, 10 years from now, I'm going to be reading some list on the internet about, like, classic Oscar snubs for Best Picture. It's going to be like, the fact that this fucking thing didn't win, and we are still talking about this movie 20 years from now.
Yeah, no, none of those new releases, just in terms of impact, I think really even comes close in some ways.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah. All right. I am so curious to hear your game list.
All right.
Because I bet there's ones I haven't even heard of on here.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right, and like we said, I'll join in at number 5.
Okay, yeah. So my game thing. So since this list was so hard to make, I made this a little more complicated. That I did 2 things. I have my top 10 list. Then I also constructed a set of sort of preliminary, just generic awards that I want to give, because there are some games that had specific qualities that I wanted to recognize, but didn't find places for them on my list. So I'm just going to go down and talk about these a little bit, and then one of them we'll talk about. I don't know if we'll talk about it now, but we'll talk about it. So first, I have 2015's 2014 Game of the Year award, which for me goes to Destiny, and this is a recognition from myself that when we did that this last year, that I gave Far Cry 4 Game of the Year for last year, and I love Far Cry 4 to death, but I think I made a mistake in not giving it to Destiny, in that Destiny is a highly flawed game, but I think in terms of a game that has ambition and creativity, it's so rare to find something like Destiny that is also in the AAA space. And I think even like despite the tremendous number of flaws that it had at launch, I think seeing now where it has come with The Taken King and seeing the support it has gotten and the evolution it has gotten, and just recognizing that ambition and that creativity is something that I really value so much, and I think I didn't put Destiny at number 1, probably mostly because I felt like kind of obligated to in a weird way because it has those flaws and because like I was burned out on it when I made that list. But now with the perspective on it, I think without a doubt Destiny deserves that recognition because, again, despite its flaws, we were like, especially for a year like 2014, which was such a stale year for video games in general, which is why Far Cry 4 got my award, which it's a really great game, but it's an incredibly similar game to Far Cry 3. That I think we should recognize and celebrate the qualities that a game like Destiny has that so few games do, you know?
Well, and I totally understand where you're coming from. My view, I put Destiny at like number 5 or 6 on my list last year, and I don't regret that. It's on my list this year, and it's higher. And I think it stepped into its own. It became the game it was, I almost said destined to be. God, fuck me.
You're doing
fuck
some
me.
punk
I don't know
shit
what I'm
recently.
doing. I'm not meaning to.
I don't know what's happened, because you weren't doing it at the start of the podcast.
Go on.
Started like
Go on.
Okay, so that's my 2015-2014 Game of the Year award. Next is my Raddest Game award. And the Raddest Game of the Year goes to Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair. If you want to hear me talk more about this game in depth, I talked about it at the top of last week's podcast. But just in short, this is a game that I think only a very small number of people would really be able to appreciate it for what it is, and I understand that, and I recognize that. But for me personally, it allows me to do something in a video game that I've always wanted to do. It allows me to experience a genre in video games that feels like it is tailor-made for video games, but is kind of too amazing and too fucking rad for video games to actually do. And there's a certain a certain price that needs to be paid to get that. And that price is shitty looking graphics, a questionable frame rate, not so great graphics, but god damn it, if I have not had more fun at certain moments of Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair this year than any other video game. There's just moments of sheer brilliance where you will have your jetpack on and you coast over a mountain and you see in the distance 5 alien dropships and then this fucking giant mothership that's something you're eventually going to have to try fly the mile over there to blow that mothership up, but you've got about 100,000 giant insects in your path to cut through to get there. It's moments like that, or moments where you get into a giant mech and punch the shit out of a giant dinosaur monster. I think that's really rad, so that's why Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair, gets the Raddest Game Award for me.
Nice. I like Raddest Game Award. We should do this every year.
It depends. These awards are transitory. They only exist when the game exists that deserves it. They just come into being with the game, I feel.
It's great.
So this next one is a little bit unique. This is, if I have to fight this motherfucker again, I'm going to burn the world to ashes award. And this award goes especially to the Warden Eternal from Halo 5, because holy fucking shit, they did the same boss fight 5 fucking times in that game, in a game that's only 6 hours long. How the fuck do you do that? It's so insanely egregious that I felt I had to recognize it somehow.
It's an amazing thing. It's not necessarily a good thing, but it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's really, because it was just I was putting this together and I was like, this has to come up somehow, and this is, I think, the appropriate venue for it. Warden Eternal, go fuck yourself. Okay, next is my most Kamehameha award. This award goes to Dragon Ball Xenoverse. This award exists entirely because I played a lot of Dragon Ball Xenoverse, and it's not a particularly good game, but it's a really fun game. I just really enjoyed my time with it, even though it has an insane number of flaws, and I can tell you about those flaws in depth more than most people probably can. But I don't care. I had a lot of fun with it. Not so much fun that outweighs the flaws that I felt like it could muscle its way onto the list past some other games, but enough that it felt wrong not to at least say that I really, really had a lot of fun with Dragon Ball Xenoverse. And, it had a lot of Kamehamehas. Because also, if you haven't really played that game, the main thing in that game is that once you get to the point where you can make your character Super Saiyan, what that does means that you can basically spam your super attack for as long as you are Super Saiyan. That's more or less on a timer, which means that once you unlock Super Saiyan, basically all you do for the rest of the game is become Super Saiyan and shoot Kamehamehas, which is very repetitive. It's also kind of the best thing that, if there's only one thing you're ever going to do for an entire video game, it might as well be fire a Kamehameha, right? That's...
Sure, why not?
There are few things that are more fun than that. So that's my most Kamehameha award. And then the true reason why I did this award thing was to recognize one game that did something real special this year that no other game did. My beautiful disaster award goes to Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. A game that, god damn it, there are very small slivers and aspects of this game that are better than any other game on my list in terms of some things that the gameplay does and just some of the technical achievements with the graphics and the really solid 60 frames per second frame rate. But holy shit, is there no other game this year that came out that more proves that a game is something that stands on a holistic experience and not upon individual elements than Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain.
This could be a podcast on its own, is talking about the overly hyping reactions of Metal Gear Solid 5 at the end of this year, when I've had to read all the fucking Game of the Year pieces of people just saying things about it that are false. If you enjoyed the game, more power to you. I'm glad you had fun. But if you're saying things like Polygon did, of saying, it's amazing that in the year when Konami had all these problems, they made this flawless Metal Gear Solid 5. It's not flawless.
No.
It's unfinished. It is, by everyone's own admission, completely unfinished. It ends on mission 48, which is a repeat of the first mission in the game.
Yeah.
So it's like some of that hyperbolic stuff that's just so out there that you have to... I can totally understand that this game, you can have enough fun with it that you want to ignore things, but to ignore those things, you have to twist your interpretation of this game so hard. Yeah. It is, as you say, a beautiful disaster. I think that's a pretty good way to put it.
Yeah. It's
emphasis on disaster.
Yeah. It is something where it's like, it's kind of so incredible in what it is and how beautiful some parts of it are and how much it just completely falls apart at the end. That's like, it has to be recognized.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's something where it's like, man, if you are interested in like studying games as like an academic pursuit, I kind of think that like there is no game more worthwhile playing than Metal Gear Solid 5 that came out this year. Because holy shit, like the stuff it does wrong is so illuminating to what like other games do right that like you don't usually recognize, but like the ways in which it falls apart and the ways in which it fails, I think has made me appreciate other games on my list more than I did beforehand, because it's like you need something that really fucks up in a spectacular way for you to really understand what it is that other games are actually doing well.
It is unquestionably one of the most significant games of the year.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
All right.
Okay. Then here I have just a quick list of, I just want to recognize, this is my games I really should probably play award. This is just a list of games that for either time reasons or like platform reasons I never played, but I really recognize I should and want to get around to them at some point. And it's just Her Story, which I've heard is a really interesting FMV game on the PC. That's sort of like a detective investigation-y game I really want to play. Undertale, which sounds really good.
I've been playing it.
You have?
Yes, I have it on my Mac. I've been playing it. I have not had time to finish it. I wanted to for this list. If I had, it would be on my list. I think it's a brilliant game. I need to play more of it.
Yeah, I own Undertale on Steam. I just, for whatever reason, I haven't got around to starting it yet, but I will at some point.
So good.
Yeah. Then Rise of the Tomb Raider. This is a game I want to play, but for obvious reasons that I don't like. I mainly play on the PS4, and because it also came out at the same time as Fallout 4, I have not really gotten around to it, but I want to play it. And
no one else did either. It's okay.
Yeah, that game did. That game did not sell particularly well, but
it's such a good game.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Then Tales from the Borderlands is a game I want to play that I got on PS4 for like fucking like $2 or something ridiculous because it was on sale. And this is just like, I haven't played a Telltale game since The Walking Dead, but this has been getting such great reviews and people talking about it in a way that it sounds like it maybe remedies some of the issues that I had with The Walking Dead, that I really want to jump in there and sort of give it another chance and see what Telltale has been up to. And, you know, it's got Troy Baker and Laura Bailey playing the two main characters, and that's always fun because they're always great. And then Life is Strange, which is another episodic game.
I really want to play that,
yeah, which has been getting great reviews, and that sounds really interesting. That sounds like it's very much in the Telltale model, but made by a different studio, and that sounds really interesting. So I want to get around to that at some point. But so that's my preliminary awards. Now, one other slight preliminary thing. I always do this. I always have my honorable mentions. This year I only have one. The honorable mention for me, the reason why I have these for my list, is that it's for me to recognize a game that I feel like would probably be on my list, but for a specific reason it can't make it, whether I didn't finish it and thus feel like it can't be on the list or for some other reason. Here, my honorable mention goes to Super Mario Maker. This is a game, I played a couple of hours of it when Jonathan, you brought the Wii U and hooked it up to the TV.
Can I say something too?
Yeah.
I started up my Wii U again when I got it home.
Did
you made the scariest me in creation. What the fuck did you do?
Well, like, it was something where I had two choices when I was faced to making a me, which I hadn't done since I got my Wii in like 2007 or 8 or whenever the fuck that happened. And I was like, I can do this one of two ways. I can either just go with the default me and not think about it, or I can actually try to make one, and if I'm actually going to try to make one, I'm not going to make a normal one. So instead, what I did was I took all the facial features and I just made them all as small as I possibly could, moved them to the center, piled them in a line, and made a series of abstract shapes.
Okay, I have to stress that. So I had the Wii U at our apartment, and I had it downstairs where Sean plays games, and I didn't use it for a couple weeks. And then I saw you were playing Mario Maker.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, Sean's playing Mario Maker. But I hadn't thought that you would have to create an account. So I had to move back home. I had the whole story. And I set my Wii U up again to play Smash Bros. With my brother. And I open it up, and there's this scary fucking me on the home screen. It was
so it's completely bald, has just this normal oval head. and it's just in the middle of its completely bald blank face, or it's just like, it's like a circle, a triangle, and then just like a weird, like its eyes, I twisted the eyes to kind of be like another triangle at the bottom, and that's the entire thing. I forget what I made its name completely mathematical symbols, I think, too.
Oh, really? I haven't seen its name because I didn't like sign in as it, but it made me laugh because when you turn on the Wii U, your sign-in info is on the gamepad, but on the TV, the Mii's are just walking around, and it's because it's me, and I look like me, and Thomas, and he looks like Thomas, and then Sean as this just deformed monstrosity.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I completely forgot that I did that.
It's so great.
Yeah. The reason why Super Mario Maker is an honorable mention is because I only had enough time to play a couple of hours of it, and I did enjoy it. But it was something where I had a lot of fun with Super Mario Maker watching various YouTube videos and stuff that people have made showing off like really insane levels. And so I've actually like spent several, like probably about like a dozen hours or so since the game came out over like that time, just seeing random YouTube videos and stuff like that and sort of like getting Super Mario Maker in my periphery and being really fascinated by it. And the couple of hours I spent playing it was really intriguing, but like not enough that I really wanted to try to invest the time, and it wasn't like a good time to really get into the game. So that's why it's on here in my honorable mentions. That like if I like had a Wii U and I had bought the game when it came out and was playing it then, that game would probably be on this list. But obviously that's not how it happened. So anyways, now to my list proper. My number 10 game of the year is J-Star's Victory vs. Plus. This is a game I talked about over the summer when I got it a little bit on the podcast then. And it's basically, it's kind of in the similar vein as Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair, which was also, funny enough, I was going to do a cheap Jonathan thing that you do sometimes, where you put like 2 things in one slot on the list and make your top 10 list like actually top 11 list and shit like that.
I only do that for silly top 10 lists.
But you do that, and you defame the sanctity of the top 10 list. And originally my number 10 slot was J-Star's Victory vs. Plus and Earth Defense Force 4.1, The Shadow of New Despair, until I moved that and just made it the Raddest game. And because just
I think you honored it properly.
Yeah, because those 2 games do something very similar for me in that they're both really weird Japanese games, which is always fun. But it's also they're kind of like guilty pleasure games, and that like I recognize that J-Stars. It's not perfect. It's not an incredible gaming like programming achievement or anything. The combat system is very sort of light and has a lot of sort of flaws and stuff in it. But god damn it, it was kind of like with Earth Defense Force and like with Dragon Ball Xenoverse. It's a game I just had so much fun playing, and it's like a lot of that is the tremendous amount of fan services that is in that game. But I'm not ashamed to say that like if you do fan service well and it's something that I'm a fan of, I am fucking happy, man. Like, if I can fight and I can have, like, Himura Kenshin from Rurouni Kenshin, and I can have Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho, and have them fight together and fighting, like, Toguro and fucking Vegeta. Like, I'm fucking happy, man. Like, that's awesome. And the fact that, like, the sheer achievement of bringing all those licenses together and representing them faithfully and in an interesting manner in that fighting game, that's a real accomplishment and something that does deserve to be recognized because it's not something that's easy to do by any means.
No, and I love this game, and I think calling it just fan service is underselling it because I know the fighting system has its flaws, but it's also like Dragon Ball Z tends to do this a lot where they do these weird 3D fighting games.
Yeah, like Xenoverse.
Like Xenoverse, and I think Xenoverse, the fighting is awful. I can't stand Xenoverse.
I'm not going to sit here and say that it's good.
Okay, but I really do like the 3D fighting in J-Stars. I think there's something it's not perfect, but I think there's something very clever about the way it's done. I think it's got the best, like, just all-around fighting game versions of Goku, Vegeta, and Frieza, just in terms of Dragon Ball Z as an example.
Yeah.
And then you've got characters who maybe don't ever get to be in a fighting game, like Arale,
yeah.
or some of the other characters from some other Jump properties. And I think the stages are so creative. And I could have padded out my top 5 to a top 10 had I accepted this as a 10th place slot. But I thought, this was a 2014 game for me. Right. That's when I played it. I think it was an honorable mention on my list that year, and I played the Japanese version that year. I have not played Plus yet. I look forward. I have it on my Vita. I did buy it in a sale. I just haven't had time to play it yet. But I look forward to getting into it and actually being able to read everything that's in it. But it's a really fun game. And, fun is just part of the equation, man.
It is. It's like I sunk so many hours into this game over the summer. Like, it just really... Because it was the game that, like, when I was playing The Witcher 3, Like, there's, like, this spot in the middle where I just sort of, like, took a break because Witcher 3 was a bit too heavy for me. And that's when I downloaded J-Stars. And it's like, it was just the perfect game for the perfect time for me during the summer. It's like, I just need something really light that I can play that's really fun. And it's just like, you know, I just get to fucking play as, like, Ichigo from Bleach, or I get to play as Naruto, or I get to play, like, these characters from these shows that I really love. Or, like, I just get to be like, why the fuck are there, like, 5 One Piece characters in this? Because I don't watch One Piece. I only know Luffy is literally the only One Piece character in this that I know. And I can name probably at least, like, 6 or 7 major One Piece characters.
It is funny, they don't have, like, Zoro or Nami or any of the characters I think most people would associate with One Piece, but yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
What's the reindeer? The reindeer guy.
Yeah, Tony Chopper.
Tony Chopper.
Yeah.
He's.
They should have worked him in. That would have been fun.
He's. If you play in the story mode, he's like the NPC that's like at the whatever, like the One Piece city. I think he's up in like the north, like in the snowy place, and you can talk to him there sometimes. But that's the most that.
Like he could have been like a Raleigh. He could have just been this small character who does crazy shit. Oh well.
Yeah, but I mean, fuck yeah. But J-Stars Victory vs. Plus like lands on the list for having Raleigh in it. Alone, like that's really awesome.
So great
being able to play as her.
It's even got a Dr. Slump stage.
Yes, yeah, it's one of the best stages.
Right.
Too.
Number 9.
Okay, my number 9 is Halo 5 Guardians.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
This is a game that I almost bumped it off my list. Actually, this was originally my number 10, and then I played some Halo 5 Guardians multiplayer last night, and I was like, I'm being a little bit unfair to this game. And that one, the support it's gotten since the release, like, is encouraging. Like, it's not 100% what I would love it to be. Like, I wish I had more multiplayer modes. But when I wrote that review, like, it's like what I said in that review is still true. Like, if you just want to play Halo multiplayer Slayer, this is the best that has ever been. And that's, like, and if this game had the rest of the stuff that Halo games normally do, it would be competitive for my number 1 slot.
Yeah.
But since it doesn't, since the campaign is very disappointing, but the campaign's not, like, has its moments as well. Like, it's not a complete failure. It's not, like, 100% terrible. But if the campaign was better, and if it had a more fully featured multiplayer suite, it would be way higher on the list. But I do think that the rock-solid fundamentals of the combat are fun enough and good enough that I do think it deserves to be on this list. And, like, the technical achievements with it being the first new Halo game to be 60 frames per second at launch and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All that's really impressive. And it's a game that, like, it's also would be my most disappointing game of the year, like, if I gave out that award. But a game that's the most disappointing game of the year can still be a really great game and still be on the list, even if, you know, I wish it was way higher.
No, it's okay. I totally get what you're saying. And it's not on any of my lists. It's one where I think I played substantially more than you did, even of multiplayer and stuff. I logged like 40 hours in this.
Yeah, I did not play that much.
Yeah, and I enjoyed a lot of what I played, but at the same time, the overall package was disappointing enough to me that just there's a symbol that I stopped playing after a couple weeks, and I did come back also to check some of the new content, and I think some of it is okay, but not enough to keep me around, and that's kind of where, to me, it's damning as a Halo experience. But I get what you say. I mean, some of the things, it definitely some of the most fun moments I had of the year were in Halo 5 Guardians. And maybe I'll go back and play some more multiplayer at some point. Because it can be fun. It's just sound effects alone.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, like I said, there are parts of that game that are really, really, really amazing.
Yeah.
That's why it's my number 9. But, yeah. I had a hard time figuring out where to place that game on the list. So then my number 8 is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. This is a game I've talked about quite a bit on the podcast already. And it's actually a game I haven't quite finished, but there's no way that whatever happens at the end of the game would move it anywhere on my list because the story is not, like, particularly interesting at any point. And so it's like Assassin's Creed Syndicate. It's a good Assassin's Creed game. It's definitely not as good as Assassin's Creed 4. But I really enjoy it. I think the recreation of London is really impressive and a lot of fun to move around in, even if I think, again, like there's so much thematic potential to be mined from the settings that Assassin's Creed has that they just never really get into, and they only tap into the surface level. That part's disappointing, but like it's cool to at least to be able to approach that and have like a Victorian London game at all that like has that sort of scope to it. And the combat's really fun. The sort of the assembling your gang is really like the part of the game that's the most fun to me. And that experience is a tremendous amount of fun. Any game that has a map that is split into color-coded sections that you get to go there, kill a bunch of guys, and then it becomes your color, that's a pretty good game. Like, if it does that, that's probably already a pretty good game. This game has a lot of that. So that's why it's my number 8. Moving on, my number 7 is Galaxy the Dimensional. This is another game that I talked about a little bit on the podcast over the summer, because that's when it came out. It's a PSN game for the PS4. I think it's also on PC now. And it's basically this roguelike game that takes a lot of inspiration from 80s mech anime like Gundam and stuff like that, where you play as this pilot in a ship, and basically each mission you go on, it's mostly focused on you exploring these small, randomly generated maps and encountering these really sort of intricate combat scenarios that are also basically randomly generated, and trying to make your way out of it alive, because holy shit, this is the hardest game on my list. This game is fucking really hard, and it's something where I haven't beaten it, but like beating the game, like at what point you say you've beaten the game, I think is kind of hard to determine, because it's like you would have to put a huge amount of time into this game, I think, to get really good at it, to be able to like get to the hardest sort of difficulty stages. But it's a game where the combat is really finely tuned, really, really, really fun, and it's incredibly unique, because it sort of takes that sort of ballet dance that you want a space shooter to be, and it takes that and it really makes a full combat engine out of it. And then it only gets better when you get to the second sort of section of the game, and you unlock the mech transformation for your ship, and then you can transform to a mech with a beam sword and a grappling hook, and grab onto other ships and slice the shit out of them and throw them into the other ships and daze them. Like, it's a game that the combat is so incredibly intricate and so well designed that, like, the combat system alone sort of gets it onto the list. But then also all the design elements around it and sort of evoking that sort of very specific 80s anime style is really fantastic. Like, this game has the greatest pause screen in any game ever, because the pause screen is basically styled after like a VCR, where like if you press pause, it's got like the fuzzy lines that play across it, and it's got like the big blocky white letters that like a VCR menu has and stuff like that, and like a tracking bar at the bottom. Like that, like the style in this game is really phenomenal, and it's got a great soundtrack as well. So it's also, I guess it would be like my indie game of the year if I had that award this year. Okay, now my number 6. It's also my 2014 game of the year, and it's my number 6 this year game of the year is Destiny. But this is specifically Destiny: The Taken King. It was something where I was having a hard time figuring out if this was something I should just like move into like an honorable mention or something. But I felt the Taken King expansion pack is so big and has enough content in it, I feel more than justified as sort of like just treating it as a new game and another game to be considered on this list. And we've talked about Destiny a huge amount on this podcast. I don't know how much more there's to say, but the Taken King really was the game that the expansion that sort of broke Destiny open and sort of showed its true potential and broke past all those flaws that launch Destiny had. And it was the thing that like all those 2 expansion packs that they put out were like incrementally, were not like super satisfying on their own, but incrementally moved Destiny in a direction where you kind of saw, particularly with House of Wolves, like, okay, like they're figuring out what to do with this. And then I feel like Taken King came in and just gave out like this huge knockout blow that was like, you just like putting in Nolan North now as the new voice of the Ghost, and then like what they did with the story and the presentation, and like just like small touches like how they introduced the new subclasses and made that like this small mission that had like the presentation narrated by whoever your class leader was, and then you go into this mission that allows you to sort of like get your new subclass, and then just allows you to fuck around with it. You get like that infinite super bar basically, and play around with that. Small touches like that went a long way to sort of remind you that that like while Bungie is not what Bungie used to be when it made Halo, like there is still, I think, that heart in that company. It just like you couldn't quite find it in most of Destiny, but there are moments in the Taken King, like when you open it up and you go onto Phobos and like the Taken have arrived, and like there's the weird portals and stuff, and Cabal guys getting sucked into some like other dimension. Like you get those like windows into the Bungie of old, and get that back into Destiny. That makes you really realize what you love about Destiny and what made you fall in love with Halo that still exists in this lineage, and makes Destiny this interesting successor to the Bungie lineage. And like Destiny is a game that I'm going to keep on playing for years and years and years, because the shooting is incredible. It's still, I think the combat is the best first-person shooter I've ever played, and what they have done with expanding it with the Taken King has just brought the rest of the game closer to that level of quality that you have with the shooting and the movement and stuff.
Absolutely.
All right.
So now we're out into the top 5.
Yes, we are.
I'm going to go now because I want you to be able to do your number 1 last.
Okay,
All right.
go ahead.
So my number 5 game of the year is, again, I played enough this year that I could have made a top 10, but not a top 10 enough that is competitive enough by my own personal standards. I would have had to put on games that I'm a little disappointed in. So I was like, but my top 5, I'm leaving off a couple of good ones, and these 5 are gems, so I felt good about this. My number 5 is Rise of the Tomb Raider on the Xbox One. Tomb Raider 2013, I think, when that one came out, was a great game, a revelatory reboot, a game that definitely had shades of Uncharted to it, but I think went beyond that.
Yeah.
And Rise of the Tomb Raider is not revelatory. It is in many ways more of the same, but it's more of the same and better and improved in some small but important ways. And the presentation is just so gorgeous. I think it's maybe the best looking game on Xbox One. It just fucking sings visually. You have Camila Luddington doing one of the best performances in video games right now as Lara Croft and making her into a real character, and the writing does that too, and just all the little touches of how Lara talks to herself while looking at things or examining those artifacts, and how the actual act of doing collectibles can become an act of character building and things like that. Yeah. And then having a story that is in some ways improved from the last Tomb Raider game with a clear villain and some other good side characters. A sense of pace. This game fucking moves, but it's also got a length and heft to it. These environments that are so interesting and creative. And this baseline fundamental gaming system that is so good. And, at the end of the day, there were a couple other games I could have put in this number 5 spot that are maybe more interesting in some ways than what Rise of the Tomb Raider does. Because this is a sequel. It is not a big new thing. It is a sequel, but... One, this game was criminally underappreciated when it came out because they went exclusive on the console. A lot of people don't have. Yeah. And they released against Fallout 4. That was an act of weird ego and hubris. Yeah. I don't really get that. But it is really good. And if you like this kind of adventure game, these Tomb Raider games are doing it so well. And Rise of the Tomb Raider is just the next step in that and makes me so excited to see what they could do next. There are shades of Metroid Prime in here, in how you just kind of go around and visit the world and can kind of come back and forth. And I use that as big praise, and I would like to see what Crystal Dynamics can do if they keep working and evolving this franchise, because it's something special.
All right.
So that's my number 5.
Like I said, I gave it a games I really should probably play award. So
no, totally.
I agree with everything you've said.
Thank you.
My number 5 is Fallout 4, the game that took Rise of the Tomb Raider's lunch
yes.
and just all of it, and its dinner and its breakfast and all of it, and just you can go starve in the cold, Rise of the Tomb Raider, because some idiot fucking put you next to me. And it's it doesn't matter how good these two games are. Fallout 4 is going to make a lot more money than Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Fallout 4, I was actually kind of surprised when I made this list. I don't think I would have been if I had really thought about what would all be on my list. But Fallout 4 was a game that when I was playing, I was thinking this is definitely a top 3 game of the year. It's got to at least be up there because I'm having so much fun with it. Then I started playing this, making the list, and I was like, fuck. There were 4 other games that came out this year that I like more than Fallout 4, and a couple of them I like substantially more than Fallout 4.
I'm really curious. I'm not sure what these 4 are.
Yes. So Fallout 4 is a game that's again, we've talked about it plenty on the podcast. I guess I'll just this will be my place to air my final thoughts, is that it's a game I've had a tremendous amount of fun with. I think they've made a lot of smart changes, that the combat is fantastic. I think what they've added to the resource loop of the game that was missing in Fallout 3 really adds to the setting and allows you to feel like you are actually scavenging the surrounding area, trying to collect new materials and to improve your character, to modify your weapons and stuff like that, which also, if you're someone who is having some difficulty with playing Fallout 4, if you spec your character to make you good at modding weapons, you completely out-level that game and curve the combat system because your weapons are way more powerful than what the game can accommodate for, which is always fun. The thing I ideally want to seek for in a game is a game that I can play for about a dozen hours or so at bare minimum, and after about those dozen hours, if I have mastered the systems enough that I can break the systems, that's pretty good. If I can break the systems before that point, then the game's not interesting. But this is a game that's you can learn the systems intricately enough that you can completely break them and sort of exploit them and make yourself way more powerful than it feels like you are meant or designed to be. And that's always a lot of fun when you can sort of exert mastery over a game like that. And Fallout 4 has those qualities to it in terms of the character progression that I really enjoy. And then also, as always, I think the world is incredible. Just the setting and the level design and the world design that Bethesda has is really top notch in their open worlds, and that it just has that quality of you wanting to pick a direction, walk in a direction, find whatever is in that direction, and just experience it and have fun with it. And that's like the core of these games is about that sort of exploratory loop. And it's here in Fallout 4, and it's basically as strong as it's ever been. And then on top of that, Fallout 4 has not like amazing characters and not like great character writing, but it feels like it has characters and the companions that you can encounter along the way, and they have stories associated with them and arcs, and like they change over the course of you like sort of spending time with them. And it's not amazing, it's not great, it's nowhere near as good as like the writing in the other games on my list, like above this point. But it's way better than what Bethesda has usually done, in that Bethesda has tried to gesture towards some of that stuff, but has never really committed to doing any of it. And here, even if it's not amazing, the fact that they actually like committed to trying to do a companion system and have more fleshed out supporting characters like that goes a long way to sort of like helping me sort of want to spend more time with the game to get to know those characters better. And so all those things about Fallout 4 are great. And I think the one main reason why it's number 5 on this list, and the most damning thing I guess I can say about it, is that while all those things about Fallout 4 are really good, and some of them heavily improve on the Bethesda formula, at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to walk away from Fallout 4 and not feel like it's sort of lacking as a sequel to Fallout 3, especially if you compare it to Skyrim from Oblivion. There's an excitement and an energy and a creativity to Skyrim in the ways that Skyrim just stripped out systems from Oblivion and just like threw them away and figured out something else to do and just completely revised the way that whole aspects of that whole franchise had worked for decades at that point, and said, like, that stuff doesn't work anymore. We're going to do something else. Like, there's an energy to Skyrim and to Oblivion compared to Morrowind, and like there's that energy to it that's really satisfying and exciting about those games. And Fallout 4, while it's a really good game, and I can't fault it in a lot of ways other than some of its technical flaws, at the end of the day, Fallout 4 is not a very exciting game, I guess. Like, it does things that definitely improve on Fallout 3, but it doesn't feel like it ever like looks at Fallout 3 and says, like, you did this wrong and we're taking that away. It's more like, we're just piling more stuff onto what we did with Fallout 3, which makes it better, but it doesn't make it very exciting or invigorated. And it feels like it's, I wouldn't say a by-the-numbers sequel, but it's more a by-the-numbers sequel than it should be, considering like the amount of time we've waited since Fallout 3. And so that's why it's a number 5. None of that stuff means that it's a bad game, but like with the competition it has higher up on this list, it just can't win because of that.
I understand.
Yeah.
My number 4 is Super Mario Maker. And
okay.
I have played many games in my life that celebrate creativity, and I love games for the creative aspects. I love how much creativity you can find in video games and how much time you can spend amidst creativity. But I've never played a game that was in and of itself an act of creativity to play, wherein I found myself playing Super Mario Maker and flexing the same muscles I do when I write, when I record this podcast, when I do anything I consider a creative or artistic action. And so Mario Maker I wound up playing in a way I've never played a game before, where it was not a leisure activity to me.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's something where if I'm going to play Mario Maker, then I suppose I could get into the actual system of really playing other people's levels, and I should do that more. I just haven't had the time. But, you know, when I sat down to play Mario Maker, it was, okay, I got to think of something to make. And if you can think it, you can kind of make it in this game within the boundaries of what a Mario game is. They've given you all the tools. It is an incredible toolkit that they've given you, and incredibly accessible and fun to use and just fun to play. But it's like writing, or it's like game design, and I think that's so fascinating and wonderful. And in some ways, it prevented me from playing the game as much as I would this year, because there are some days I get home and I just need to play a game. Making a game is a different thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a day, if I get home and I'm not going to go write something, I'm not going to play Mario Maker either. And that's interesting to me. And so it wound up at number 4 because I probably played it a little less than the other games higher on the list. But in terms of just a remarkable video game achievement, I could have made an argument for this at number 1. It is really an incredible thing. And as a big Mario fan and as a lifelong Mario fan, it is such a great celebration of that series and such a technical achievement in so many ways. And if it winds up being something of a swan song for the Wii U, you know, we're going to have more games next year, and I'm sure there's going to be some good ones. But as a swan song for what the Wii U could have been, if maybe they found other ways to really implement what was so special about it. Because this game couldn't exist on another console.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do a PC version of it, but that's not what Nintendo does. Man, it definitely made me feel like, as many Wii U games have, I'm glad to own this strange little console that not a lot of people own, but the ones who do, there's some very special things about it, and Mario Maker kind of defines that.
Yes, and now your strange little console is blessed with a strange little me.
Yes, it very, very much is. That was my number 4. What's yours?
Okay, my number 4, this is the little game that could when I was making this list. It's Persona 4 Dancing All Night. This is a game that when I was making this list, like, what was, like, basically my top, like, 7 or 8 was more or less set, and then I was, like, put Persona 4 there, like, near the bottom at, like, number 8 or something. And I was like, and then I just started, like, pairing it up. And I was, like, trying to figure out where it should weigh in on the list. And I was, like, paired it up with Assassin's Creed Syndicate and just did that, like, mental, like, debate in my head. It's like, which game did I like more? And just, like, just came to this, yeah, I guess I like Persona 4 Dancing All Night more. And then it was like, okay, then what about Galaxy the Dimensional? Like, I had a lot of fun playing that game. It's a game I've come back to a lot. I was, like, just thinking about it, it's like, yeah, no, like, I really liked Persona 4 Dancing All Night more than Galaxy. Okay, Destiny the Taken King. Well, surely it's not. And I was like, no, wait, no, yeah, I think I liked it more than Destiny the Taken King this year. And then for a really long time, it sat at number 5, and Fallout 4 is at number 4. And then last night, I was looking at my list again, just sort of thinking about it, and it was like, you know what? No, that's not, like, it's like, it was something where, it's kind of like that heart and mind thing, where it's like, my, like, intellect says, like, well, probably Fallout 4 is probably the better game. Like, if you're trying to think about it more objectively, I would probably say that, but I don't know why I would say that, because, like, every cell of my body is just screaming, dude, Persona 4 Dancing All Night was so much fun. And I was like, fuck it, no, yeah, like, Persona 4 Dancing All Night was the most fun game I played all this year. And so it also gets my most fun award for this year. That's like, there are other games that I played this year that I think are better and like better, more rounded sort of like emotional experiences, which are the compose my top 3. But there's no game I played this year, bar none. There is no game I had more fun playing than Persona 4 Dancing All Night. It's a game that I really loved playing the story mode. I really love all the characters, and just like the presentation of the game is incredible. Just every detail that goes into, like, I guess what you call the fan servicey side of the game, of like the Persona side of just stuff like when you finish one of those songs and then your Persona comes out and plays like this like instrumentalized version of Reach Out to the Truth for an instrument that is like directly sort of selected to be thematically consistent with the character you're playing as. Like, little details like that are just amazing. And then when I was thinking about like all the Nanako that's in this game, it's like that's like transcendent. All the Nanako stuff is amazing. And just, there's no game I played this year, I think, that I delved more into and like more intricately understood the basic mechanics of than Persona 4 Dancing All Night. The rhythm mechanics, that's like, I played this game to the fucking edge. I played this game to the point where I literally couldn't beat it anymore. Like to the heights of my skill, I pushed my limits, pushed them, and then got to the point where it's like, I would need to like do exercises with my fingers to be able to beat the True Story Risei song, which is the most difficult song in the original the original sort of selection of songs in the game, on the hardest difficulty. I just physically can't beat it unless I went into training to beat it. I hit that point. And it was like, when I think about that and all the effort I put into the game and like how much I played it and how much I sort of like really expanded my ability to play these rhythm games by playing Persona 4 Dancing All Night, like, it has to be at this spot. And then, like, that's not even talking about just how absolutely incredible the soundtrack is, because those remixes are so good, and I've been listening to the soundtrack so much. I have so much fun with that soundtrack, and I think those remixes are inspired, and some of those remixes I like better than the original version of the song. It's like, all of that just says, it's like, God damn it, Persona 4 Dancing All Night is a better game than Fallout 4.
I completely approve of it being a better game than Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, holy shit, so much fun.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. It's not on my top 5 list.
That's a heinous crime.
It would be at number 6, but I couldn't make a top 6. That'd just be silly. So I did a top 5. I love Persona 4 Dancing All Night to death. I fucking platinum trophied this game. It's great.
It's like, I like platinum trophied and just like kept on running.
I know, yeah. No, I still go back to it sometimes. I got my Vita on my desk and just play a song. It is, a great... It is the absolute best possible version of what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know if you can... How many games can you say that about? It's so incredible.
Yeah. And that's not even to say that, like, what it is something easy either. Like, it's a weird, very unique game. It's like there's not a lot of games like that. There's, like, if you take the story mode side of it into account, there are no games like Persona 4 Dancing All Night.
Yes.
And, man, just Nanako. Just the Nanako in that game. Oh, my God.
Quality Nanako. All right, my number 3 is another Wii U title, Yoshi's Woolly World.
Okay.
Which I have not talked about yet.
No.
Yoshi's Woolly World is a fucking great game. I got it for Christmas, and my brother and I have been playing it co-op. Great co-op mode. It's like the new Super Mario Bros. Co-op where you're on the same screen, and it gets really frustrating when you realize Thomas does not know how to play co-op games, and he just acts like he's playing it on his own, and so I'll be over here trying to get one of the fucking collectible yarn balls, and he'll be off, I don't know doing what, but he'll run to the side of the screen and kill me, and then we miss the yarn ball because he's just dicking around. But the game itself, it's easy to look at how unbelievably adorable this game is. And it is maybe the cutest game you will ever play. Just the amount of character and detail and touches in every level of its graphics and aesthetic presentation. It is so superior on that level of just adorability and fun to spend time with. And it's easy to look at all that and ignore just how mechanically rock fucking solid this game is. It is a Yoshi's Island sequel through and through. It is mechanically like a Yoshi's Island game. But where Yoshi's Island DS and Yoshi's New Island for the 3DS probably both felt a little tired and not up to the legacy of the original Yoshi's Island, this is right up there. Every single level is a winner. Every world is unique. Every level is long and big and detailed in the way the original Yoshi's Island was. It is a simple game mechanically in what you have to do. You know, Yoshi has a small set of moves, and he's got his eggs to throw, which are yarn balls in this game. But within that, there's this incredible amount of difficulty and complexity to what you're doing. And I think one of the interesting things Nintendo did here is they completely did away with a lives system or anything like that. So you can play the level as much as you fucking want. You'll only, in co-op, die, of course, if both of you die, but then you go back to the checkpoint. There are no penalties or continues or anything like that, and yet it is still a very challenging game. And what they want you to do is play the levels and really get good at them. And that is, to me, an incredible platforming achievement. I think it's just a great platformer. And just, again, Nintendo packs their games with so much creativity. And I love that year in and year out. I always have a couple of Nintendo games on my lists. And this is absolutely an achievement from them. And not a minor one either. I think this is a really, really good game. And one of the Wii U's best. One of the best they've done in years. And, I mean, just graphically, this could very well be the best game I played in 2015. Just graphically, or looked at. Because there are parts of this that look completely photorealistic. Like someone actually built this with yarn and photographed it, and we're playing it against that. And just so incredible. And, like, how much thought goes into every level, and it looking like it really could be something someone built as a little mobile or something. Right. And that all the little things you jump on sometimes will even have a little string because someone's hung them up. And they've figured out how to make it all out of yarn and out of these different craft materials. And the best comparison I could make is that it's like Paper Mario, where Paper Mario mechanically was not revolutionary. It built on Super Mario RPG. It, you know, had a sort of mini-game system of playing, but what they did is they made that choice where aesthetically we're going to do this crazy thing of having Mario and having him be made out of paper and the world being made out of paper, and we're going to commit to that 100%.
Yes.
And we are going to layer that throughout the entire game, and the story is going to be based on it, and the abilities you have are going to be based on it, and the character of the game is going to be based on it, just everything, the tone, the atmosphere, and it is a singular achievement because of that. And Yoshi's Woolly World is the same way. They've chosen to make it out of wool and like handcrafted, and just there is more character in 5 minutes of just running around on the map of this game than you'll get in most games. It is so incredible in that way, and you know, again, even if it were just a pure Yoshi's Island sequel with a normal aesthetic, I think it would be a really good game. It's my number 3 of the year because you add that aesthetic on top of it, and it is a fun game to look at and be with, and then it is also just a very rewarding video game experience. So, Yoshi's Woolly World for number 3.
Okay, which is cuter, though? Is it Yoshi's Woolly World, or is it Nanako?
Okay.
You know the right answer.
Nanako as a just being
Yes.
As an overall game, Yoshi's Woolly World over Persona 4 Dancing All Night. But Nanako, I mean, Persona 4 Dancing All Night has Nanako's 2 dances. Those are the cutest things ever conceived of.
Okay, good. So Persona 4 Dancing All Night is actually the better game than Yoshi's Woolly World. It wins the fight that counts.
Okay.
So my number 3 is Batman Arkham Knight. This was a really good game.
Fuck yeah, it was a good game.
It's a Batman Arkham Knight. It's a game where we recorded like a whole podcast on it, so give brief thoughts here. I guess the main reason why Batman Arkham Knight is so high up on my list is because, principally, like, one, I think it's like, as always, Rocksteady just like absolutely executes on the Batman thing 100% in a way that like most people working with Batman don't do. Like, they are like operating at such a high level with that character and his universe, and like every game they push that to the next level, where with Arkham Knight, it just like completes that. It fulfills it, where it's like you've got the Bat family represented now like in a playable fashion, and like a cooperatively playable fashion, not with like other people, but like within the sort of the context of the story. You have Robin coming in, you have Catwoman coming in, you have Nightwing coming in. It's like they have presences in the story and interact with you in the combat and stuff like that, and all that stuff is awesome. The Batmobile is awesome, but the number one reason why it's so high up on this list for me, and it's true of all of the Rocksteady games, is that I feel like when you play one of these Rocksteady games, there's so many things you do that it's like you look at it and you're like, why aren't more games as playful as this one is with the form? And something where it's like, it's kind of that thing that like separates a movie like from a movie made by a really great director from just a good director, where it's like a movie made by a really great director is playing with what it means to be a movie and understands what it means to be a movie and a film on such a like fundamental level that they can play with that and like do things that you don't expect and that no other movies will do. They'll shoot a shot the way that no other movie will. They will edit a sequence in a way that no other movie will. They will convey something visually that no other film will think to do because it's made by that person. You know, like it has that quality, and so few games I feel do that. And all these Batman Rocksteady games do this with games where it's stuff where, you know, when the Joker just sort of pops up after you walk out a door and you spin around the camera and then he's not there anymore. It's like, it's something that you can only really get that experience in a video game because the only medium in which you control the camera is a video game. And being able to do that so seamlessly with the text and that's just like the most basic example. But all throughout the game, there are these story beats and moments where they play with that and play with your ability to manipulate the environment and the environment manipulating you and you interacting with all of this. And it plays with like different genres of video games and like that just incredible sort of mic drop moment at the end of the game, the extended Joker sequence where it transitions into a third-person shooter and then a first-person shooter. All of that is so creative and playful and innovative, and something where you see that it's like, why don't more games do stuff like this? Why don't more games jump outside of the genre boundaries to try to make a point? It's like, why don't more games sort of play with perspective in the way that like Arkham Knight does? And Arkham Knight does it for like story and thematic reasons. It doesn't even really do them for gameplay reasons, but most games don't try to do that either. And something where all the fundamentals of the Batman Arkham games are still there in Arkham Knight and are more refined than ever, and that's all great. But if it wasn't for that like level of creativity and enthusiasm and excitement that goes into like the fundamental making of this game by the creators, this game would be much farther down on the list than it is right now. But it's like, it's the kind of thing that when you set Arkham Knight and Fallout 4 next to each other, it's that sort of dividing line between a game that's like really, really good and a game that's like a real masterpiece of the genre and the medium. And I feel like that's what Arkham Knight is. Like, it understands what a video game can be, and it's very playful with that. And that takes an ambition and creativity that most video games don't have.
Yes, Arkham Knight is a little higher on my list.
All right.
I'll talk about it when we get there.
Okay.
I'll say one thing right now. Shut the fuck up about the PC version, everyone.
Yeah.
It has so over... I understand that was a mess, and it's really too bad, and I totally understand if you bought that version and you couldn't play it, that sucks. But people act like it was a broken game everywhere. No, it's one of the most rock-solid games you'll play on the consoles. And it feels like it's been completely ignored for Game of the Year stuff by everyone because of the PC debacle. But most people don't play these games on PC. So,
and I feel like it's something where I feel like there are two completely separate conversations to have. There's a conversation to have about releasing really shitty ports on PC or whatever, and that, like, yes, Arkham Knight PC completely fucked. That's not okay. But that is a totally separate conversation from you judging Batman Arkham Knight as a piece of art and, like, you criticizing it. It's like, it would be like if you said, like, The Hateful Eight was a terrible movie because you went to the roadshow screening and the projection was fucked up.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Those are two completely different things. It is not okay to have a fucked up projection. It's like, that is the conversation to have, but it's like, that is totally separate from the quality of the actual film.
That's a really great analogy, too, because Rocksteady, at first at least, had no impact on that.
They did not make the PC port. No. That's why the PC port's so fucked up.
Right, just like Quentin Tarantino doesn't get to go into every theater and project it himself. Yeah. So anyway, I've just seen it ignored a lot and in favor of pieces of shit like Metal Gear Solid 5. So just wanted to say that.
It's a game that, like, has gotten very unfairly maligned for, like, circumstances outside of, like, what the actual game is.
Yes.
You know?
So my number 2 game of the year is Destiny the Taken King.
All right.
And like I said, Destiny was my number 6 game last year, and I played Destiny a lot last year, and I liked things about it very much, even if the overall package was somewhat disappointing. No hesitation this year. Destiny was my most played game of 2015 across old games, new games, whatever, by far. I don't know if you saw they did those Xbox Play reports that you could get.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to say how much I played Destiny this year, because I got back into it before the Taken King to get ready. Yeah. And I played, House of Wolves, and I did then the Destiny 2.0 content, and I played a shit ton of Destiny before the Taken King, to the point where I was almost a little fatigued by the time the Taken King came out. And then the Taken King is just so great, and I have so many good video game memories. This had to be high on the list for me. It had to be one or two. I thought Destiny was just such a phenomenal experience this year. I played so much of it. And even when I stopped, it wasn't the reason I stopped last year, which was I got angry at the game.
Right.
Or I got frustrated with it, and I felt like, what am I doing with my life? I'm fucking farming this helium filaments on the moon day in and out. I have to stop. This year...
No, you gotta keep on going. You need that helium, bro.
This year, it was just, I played and I had fun until I stopped. And there was no real reason why I stopped. I just kept playing, and then one day I moved on to other things. And I actually think that's a sign of praise for me, because it means there was no breaking point, and it's something I look forward to going back to at some point. It took what was already a mechanically phenomenal foundation and had it realize its true potential in every area. Even, I don't think Crucible has ever gotten perfect or anything, but it's kind of a point where Crucible's really fun. And Iron Banner can be really fun in those things. And that's the weakest section of the game by far. And if that's the weakest section of your game, pretty good game.
Yeah.
And then the actual campaign. Yes, the Taken King stuff is great. But even beyond the story stuff, I just loved how the Taken themselves rewrote the fundamentals of this universe and how many new encounters you could have. And then I could go back into those old strikes and have a totally new experience. And then they added stuff like those level 28 and 30 strikes, or beyond that, level 34 strikes or whatever they had. And you can go in and those new strikes are fantastic. But you know what? Having some of the old ones and the DLC ones in there too with the Taken editions are so good. And this was the year I had on Xbox, so I started playing it cooperatively with my brother. Great co-op game, great game to play with friends. And again, this is for a game where I have never even touched the raids, which are a big part of the game.
Yeah.
And you don't need to just love this game to death. We have said a lot about Destiny on here, and man, I just start talking about it and I want to go play it. I have so many great video game memories from this year. It became what it was meant to be. It really became such a rich experience, and just for pure pound for pound fun. It's tough to have more fun than with Destiny.
Yeah. It's a really good game.
Really good game. All right, your number 2 game of the year.
My number 2 game of the year is Bloodborne. This is a game it's a really fucking good game. It's something where, I played Dark Souls a little, like, a year or two after it came out, after it had, like, sort of gotten enough praise and there was enough conversation around it that I was like, okay, people are really talking about this game. I have some free time on my hands, and I can get this game pretty cheap because it came out like 2 years ago. It didn't sell particularly well, so it's on sale. And so I played Dark Souls 1, loved Dark Souls 1 to death. It's like one of the best games on the Xbox 360 without a doubt in my mind. Then got Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was really disappointing. There's like a game that's pretty much like 2 times as long as it should be, which is way longer than anything ever should be. And so Dark Souls 2, really disappointing. And we came back for Bloodborne, because Bloodborne is directed by the guy, like the game director is the same guy who was the game director on Demon's Souls and Dark Souls. And so it came back for Bloodborne, like, with pretty high expectations, and it completely blew all my expectations out of the water. Like, it's a game that, it's something where it is very clearly in that lineage of the Souls games. It is very much in the same style. But at the same time, like what I was talking with Skyrim compared to Oblivion, Bloodborne was not afraid to sort of carve out its own identity, look at what Dark Souls was, and says, you know what? Fuck that. Shields are for pussies. Let's get that shit out of there. Like, magic, who fucking cares? Let's like push that shit so far down. Let's pick like the core thing about these games, which is the melee combat, and let's amp that up to 11. Let's speed it up. Let's make it vicious, ferocious. Instead of having like 1,000 weapons that are all basically the same, let's have like a dozen weapons, but have them all be incredibly unique and really fun to use. And they have that like fascinating transformation aspect where each weapon you have has 2 modes it can move between, like between a cane sword and a whip. And you can like transfer between them during combat and in the middle of combos. And then like the addition of using guns as this like very interesting parry system, and making the parry system from Dark Souls a lot more sort of intricate and a lot more integral to the combat system. And all of that, I think, really enlivened the combat system and made it just fast-paced, visceral, brutal combat that really, those sort of, I think I was in the perfect spot for it, because it really capitalized on the way that I played those Dark Souls games, that I mostly played them as a character that relied on dodging and really fast, quick attacks, and that's how I emphasized my character builds. And Bloodborne just like took that sort of style that Dark Souls did and said, like, this is what we're going to focus in on, and we're going to make this the best it can possibly be. So the combat in Bloodborne, I think, is incredible, with the enemy design and the tactics and everything that has to be involved with that. But then the number one thing about Bloodborne that really pushes it over the edge for me is not just that combat, but I think the world that they build is incredible. Like, obviously the Souls games have always had incredibly intricate level design, and that's one of the big things about them, is that the way that the levels sort of revolve back in on themselves, and you unlock hidden passages and go back through areas you've been and discover new sides and facets to them, and the way that areas you've been through before will evolve over the course of the game. And it has all of that, and it's as good as it's ever been. But I think the setting for Bloodborne is so much more interesting and so much more creative, where Dark Souls, you know, it's got its dark fantasy thing going on, and that's a lot of fun, and the enemy design in Dark Souls is always fantastic. But the world in Bloodborne is so creative because it takes what on the surface is this very sort of Victorian Gothic setting that's very like werewolves and like Dracula and that kind of thing, and like taking that and like making it a lot darker than it ever was in like proper Gothic Victorian, but like still very much in that style. And so it's like it's that on the surface, but then as you go deeper and deeper, you find out it's like, no, that's not really what the setting is. The setting is actually Lovecraftian horror, and there's something about the way that genre shift evolves over the course of the game that made me really personally interested in the very hands-off exploratory approach that these games have to narrative, where they do not have lots of dialogue. Like, they have like a handful of side characters that have like a handful of sentences of dialogue, and that's the most you get. Like, you get no exposition. There's nothing explaining the world or the plot line to you. It's all you having to investigate and draw conclusions on your own based on the items you find and the places you go to and the handful of people that you talk to, what the larger picture is. And that's always very opaque, and you're never quite sure what's really going on, what the real forces behind all of this actually are, and you're just constantly trying to investigate that. And in Dark Souls, I never engaged with that experience because I didn't find the narrative of Dark Souls interesting. But in Bloodborne, I think the narrative experience of shifting through that genre and the sort of the thematic appropriateness of this incredibly opaque narrative with the Lovecraftian cosmic horror of that, like, these are things that it's kind of unfathomable because these are things that are unfathomable. And that's sort of the point of the great old ones that are sort of operating behind the scenes and manipulating everything that's happening, is that these are like extraterrestrial, godlike beings that exist on a scale that you can't understand. And that's the point of the horror, is that you don't really know what's going on, and you can't understand the scale of the universe and the infinity of the universe and like what it means to be something that exists on that level. And like the whole point of Lovecraftian horror is that there's like that brief moment, like if Lovecraftian horror is ever going to work on you, there has to be like one moment where you're reading like Call of Cthulhu or something, or maybe you're playing Bloodborne, and it's like you intellectually understand what the point of the cosmic horror thing is and why it's supposed to be frightening and why characters are reacting the way they are to seeing Cthulhu. It's like it's one thing to understand that intellectually, but if for one brief moment or instance you can ever actually like get into that mindset and actually realize, oh, like you can visualize this is what it is that these people are seeing. Like this is like that scale, like what it would be like to see Godzilla in real life. And like if you can think of that for like one moment and actually like understand that in like the scale of like what it would be like to encounter an intelligent entity that had been alive for hundreds of millions of years, and what it means like for something to actually exist for hundreds of millions of years when a human can only live for like 100 at most. Like it's that brief moment of like true existential horror that like Lovecraft like can like try to convey that like nothing can really convey, because you can never really understand it. But like it's all about understanding that you don't understand it. It's like it's a sensation that I've almost never really gotten. It's like I got it once the first time I read Call of Cthulhu, and it's like I've read most of Lovecraft's writing, and none of the other ones have ever quite done it for me. But there were moments in Bloodborne where it's like I was piecing together the story about like, 'cause there's all this like really sort of like very creepy imagery about like birth and abortion and stuff like that that's very much in the background. And you're just like piecing together this like these stories about like this cosmic entity, then like it like this like birth thing, and like you just realize, oh, like that's what these things are. And it's like you just realize like, oh, that's how nothing I am. And like that brief moment of existential horror, the fact that Bloodborne was able to do that, and the fact that the only reason it could do that is because it made me discover it on my own, like that alone is enough to put it near the top of my list. But on top of that, it's just an incredibly plain game, and just like an incredibly thoughtful game, and I think is a worthy successor to the Dark Souls line and improves upon it in ways that I couldn't have even thought of before the game came out. So that's why it's my number 2.
I wish I could get into Bloodborne.
It's not a game for everybody, and I definitely recognize that.
No, I mean, it's totally... Yeah. It's one of those games where I've picked it up several times. I respect it utterly. It's not for me.
Yeah.
But I think I love, like, we've talked about it several times on the podcast, and I love hearing you talk about it, because it is such an interesting artistic achievement.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely interesting. So that's your number 2.
Yep.
Now we're down to the number 1. My number 1 game of the year is Batman Arkham Knight. Couldn't be anything else for me. I love Rocksteady's Arkham games. I think they are the best Batman things that have ever been created. When we did our top 10 games of all time list a couple years ago, I had Arkham City on there.
Yeah.
Because it's one of my favorite games, but also it just is my favorite Batman thing.
Yeah.
Well, Arkham Knight has supplanted that, which I guess means if I were to remake that list, it would have to be in my favorite games of all time, which is pretty incredible.
Then I think that's fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And just, it takes everything that was good about Arkham Asylum and Arkham City and builds upon it in a way that doesn't feel iterative, but that feels revelatory. Where, I mean, the Batmobile alone is enough to make this just a monumental achievement and a big change, whether you like the Batmobile or not. Obviously, it completely transforms the game.
Yeah.
But even outside that, just the size and the scale and the scope of Gotham City, one of the great video game technical achievements, the draw distance on Gotham City, and the way you can fly through that, and the fucking awesome Batsuit in this game, where you can just soar through this city. You can basically just fly in this game. But then on top of that, the refinements to the combat system and the exploration system and the different equipment you have, all perfected beyond belief. But what it really does come down to is that story and those performances, and what, Sean, you were talking about earlier, the experimental edge to this game.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Mark Hamill doing maybe his best performance ever as an actor, as the Joker in this game. But you have the Joker as this creation unlike I think there's ever been in a video game.
Yeah.
Where he is a hallucination, but you're really inside Batman's POV. And even in video games, POV can be a tough thing to capture, I think.
Yeah.
even in like a first person. I mean, because you have a POV in every game. You're controlling something, but
like thematizing that
yes,
POV is incredibly difficult. Without
absolutely, and doing it the way they did it in this game, where you are just so completely in Batman's head, is fascinating, and it is a great, great Batman story. And I think, it's one of the things that got so ignored in the technical mess that was the PC port, and I think a lot of critics who probably aren't as into Batman and are just viewing it as a game, which is fine, but this is such a phenomenal Batman story and such a phenomenal capper to this trilogy that really did pull off the rare feat of getting better with every installment.
Yeah.
You can't say that about a lot of trilogies in movies, games, books, whatever, but each one is better than the last, and I said it at the time, this one basically looks at The Dark Knight Rises, said, yeah, we can do that better, and did it better. And it's hard for me to be angry or impassioned or whatever, one way or another, about DC's upcoming movies, because fuck it. We just had this Batman franchise in video games that is better than any superhero trilogy. And I don't care how good. Batman Arkham Knight is better than any superhero movie I've ever seen. And I will confidently say that. I think it is just superior. And I think you can do things in this. Like, TV and games, I think, are actually much better mediums for superhero stuff than movies.
Yeah.
Which is kind of ironic because we put it all in movies. But this is like such proof of that. And like, it's one of the biggest praises I could give to Rocksteady, which is after playing this game, I so desperately want Rocksteady to make a Superman game.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would do it, but I'm sure they could figure it out if they want to, and then we would get a definitive version of Superman, and that'd be fucking great.
Yeah.
But this is just one of my favorite games I've probably ever played. I dug so deep into it. I 100%ed this game as much as you fucking could, and I felt incentivized because it felt like it was just part of the game. There was no distance between me going and doing collectibles and Batman and the story. It felt all completely unified. I basically spent a week, just 5 days solid over the summer when I was off to other stuff, just morning to night playing Batman Arkham Knight, and I don't regret a second of that. And I can't wait to go back to it someday. I can't wait to just replay the trilogy at some point.
Yeah,
Maybe at a point where I've forgotten enough of Arkham Knight that it won't be tough to go back to Arkham Asylum, and I could just go through the iteration again and that evolution, because it is an incredible... You talk about studying video games. This is a trilogy that needs to be studied, because Arkham Asylum is a great game, and then they built on it to make further and further greatness. It's incredible. And to me, just absolutely the achievement of the year, and just one of the great achievements in recent years to me of video games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's definitely it's something that's... It's funny to think about it, but it is 100% true. This is like everything that The Dark Knight Rises should have been as a movie. Like this is as a game. Like in terms of it being a capper on a trilogy for Batman. Like it's like the ending that this game has is so powerful and so effective and so creative. It's like it's the same basic conceptual ending in a lot of ways that Dark Knight Rises tries to go for, but like this just does it 100% more sort of thoughtfully than that movie did.
Yeah, and in terms of allowing you to understand a character, and a character as complex as Batman, Rocksteady, spent the last couple of years and these 3 games proving that video games can just do it better than other mediums, because you very realistically become Batman playing this. Yeah. And not just in body, but in soul and in mind. And it is fascinating. It's a really incomparable experience to me to other things.
Yeah. Really good. Okay, so that was your number 1. I think it's a really strong choice. My number 1, I think, is no surprise. If like someone is surprised that this is my number 1, has not been listening to the podcast for very long. My number 1 game of the year, and I think one of the best games I've played in a long time, is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It's something where it's kind of funny that even though I love this game that much, I kind of haven't actually talked about it on the podcast so much, because you obviously haven't played it. And I think I only really talked about it much in one episode when we like came back over the summer after like a fairly long hiatus. It was like, that was kind of the only time I really talked about it.
You talked about it before our summer hiatus when you put about 10 hours into it, and then you did a bigger review later on,
So I'm going to just go in, I'm going to just say like off the top of the bat, The Witcher 3 is the best game of the year, and I feel like I have no question about that whatsoever. And I am going to talk about some spoilers here, because I feel like I don't think it's a big deal to spoil these things, but I feel like I just want to give this game its due, because I have not really talked about it on the podcast that much. And part of the reason why I haven't talked about it is out of fear of spoilers. So I'm just going to go ahead and like just give my like definitive thoughts on The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt right now. And The Witcher 3 is a game that like I had absolutely no idea that I would like it at all. Like it was not a game I was intending on getting originally at all, because I've never played The Witcher 2, and I probably should go back at some point, but I feel like it might be hard to go back and play that one. But I did play The Witcher 1 when it came out, and I did talk about that on an episode of the podcast a long time ago, and I played it on the PC, and that was a game I played like 12 hours or something of it. I put a lot of time into The Witcher 1, enough to be like, I felt confident saying, like, I'm going to put this game down. I see that, like, there's a lot of stuff about the setting of this game that is interesting, but, like, the voice acting in The Witcher 1 was terrible. The game looked terrible. The combat was like one of the worst combat systems I've ever seen in any game ever, because it was basically about like clicking somewhat rhythmically, and that was more or less the entirety of the combat system of the game. Incredibly shallow, in no way satisfying combat. And so like I put The Witcher 1 Enhanced Edition, I believe it was, down, and kind of never looked back, and sort of skipped The Witcher 2 because I didn't want to just jump into it, because as we've talked about before, the whole reason that I have seen every single episode of Doctor Who is because I have a horrific condition that I find it incredibly difficult to jump into stories partway through. And that's like I have this incredible urge to watch things from the beginning to like understand the full context of the chronology. And so I was planning on completely skipping The Witcher 3. When it came out, it was getting the sort of the glowing reviews that it was getting, and there wasn't anything else out at the time because it came out, I believe, in May. I just decided, fuck it. It's like I have some spare cash. It's like this is like I have so much free time right now, and I'm not going to have so much free time in like a month from now. So I'll just like I need something to do. I'll get this game. I got The Witcher 3, and I fell in love with this game so fast because it's something where, you know, I'm put this like award section on the My Game of the Year list. And one of the reasons why there aren't some other categories on there is because all those categories would just go to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Like, if I was going to say best music in a game I've played all year, that category would go to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. I love the soundtrack in this game. It's incredibly unique. It has, like, that sort of, like, Polish, Eastern European style to it that, like, is infused in this entire game because it's made by a Polish studio based on a very beloved series of Polish fantasy novels with The Witcher. And so the music is fantastic. The game, the graphics are unbelievably beautiful. I mean, this is a game that I would, every single time I would play the game, there would be multiple times in that play session when I would stop for minutes at a time and just like admire a sunset and just admire the landscape and the nature in this world that they made, especially when you go to the Skellige Isles, which are these sort of based off the Nordic Isles, basically. And you climb atop a snowy mountain and you look out over the sea and you see the sun setting, and there are some flying sirens that are like going across the sun, and you see their silhouette, and the sheer beauty and the horror that this game presents, because the character design in the game is also incredible, and the fantasy elements of it and the world building. Like, there are these three sort of hag characters that are these sort of like these witches in this swamp bog that have like probably the most horrific character designs I've ever seen in any like fantasy creature. Like, they are really truly horrific and disgusting, and appropriately so, and they're really fantastic characters. And so like every component element of The Witcher 3 in terms of its production, I think, is absolutely 100% top notch. But the thing that truly is really remarkable about The Witcher 3 and why I fell in love with it so much is because of the story and the writing and the characters and the performances. And I find it absolutely astounding that the same guy is voicing Geralt, the main character, from like in all these games. Like, if you go back and watch videos of The Witcher 1, his performance in that game is so terrible. And then you go here and it's like, he is so good. And it's clearly the same voice, like he's doing the same kind of voice for the character. He hasn't changed that aspect of it, but I feel like, I don't know if it's the voice director or like if it's that guy is just growing as an actor, because I don't know him. Like, he's not like a famous voice actor. He's not in a lot of stuff. But he's so good here, and all the performances across the board are absolutely phenomenal. And I think the writing in the game it's just quite simply, I think, the best story content I've ever seen in any game ever. And that's not like, and that's me being 100% serious. Like, I'm not being like hyperbolic when I'm saying that. I'm not trying to exaggerate when I'm saying that. I'm like saying that very considerate. Like the only other games that are competitive are Persona 4 and Persona 3, which are stylistically so different that I don't quite want to compare them, because The Witcher 3 is a game that is about small stories that you like experience along the way and is not about the overall experience, where I feel like Persona 3 in particular is a very cumulative game that is much more about that impact when you get to the end of it. But like aside from Persona 3 and Persona 4, I don't think there's any other game that I've played that has better writing and better performances and a better like story and handle on thematic material than The Witcher 3. Like even The Last of Us, I don't think does, and that's The Last of Us is really, really good at that. And when I'm talking about that, I'm saying that like the smallest side quests in this game have a certain impact and a thoughtfulness and a tone to them that I feel like that so many games miss and don't understand. And the tone of The Witcher 3 is so complex because the world of The Witcher is this dark fantasy world where everything is always falling apart, and like it's a world where like kind of fantasy is dying, and in a very like dark way, whereas the Lord of the Rings, is a world where fantasy is dying in kind of an uplifting way by the time you get to it. It's like there's a melancholy to it, but also a sense of like the fourth age has dawned. Here it's like fantasy is dying, and like that means like monsters are kind of leaving and the witchers are kind of leaving, but all the magic and the wonder of the world is leaving at the same time. But there's never any sense that people's lives are going to get better, and the people's lives in The Witcher are complete fucking shit. And like one of the first quests of this game is you getting hired by this guy whose brother has is fighting for this one side in this recent battle, and who's like this like one side basically got massacred, and this guy hires you to help like guard him as he trudges along this swampy, disgusting, bloody battlefield trying to find his brother's body so he can bury him. And he wants you to guard him because he knows that this battlefield is going to attract ghoul monsters that if he goes alone, he's going to die. And so, like, the majority of that quest is just you following along this guy as this, like, very melancholy music plays. And then every once in a while, a ghoul will pop up and you kill it. But most of it is just you looking over this battlefield. And it's like, I don't know, it's like watching Henry V or something and like seeing like the carnage and like after those battles, and it's just like armors and body and swords strewn about and banners stuck into the ground that are tattered, and like the ground is just complete mush because it's raining, and you know that all that dirt was trudged up because of all the like the heavy armored soldiers that were running across that field like a day before. It's like, and it's that sort of attention to detail and that sort of somber quality and melancholy quality that creates this, again, I think a very distinctly sort of Eastern European sort of like depressing quality to it that is very common to fiction that comes from that area, in my experience at the very least. And something that not only do most games not offer an experience like that, but I feel like most novels don't, most movies don't, like most things don't have that sort of like sense of like the true sort of almost kind of nihilistic depression of like post-war. And it's something where it's almost like when you watch like the original Godzilla film or something, and you get that window into like a culture that like experiences and has recently experienced a lot of these tragedies and the horrors of this kind of stuff, and you understand like that's what this stuff is actually like, and like the sort of the racial segregation and the persecution that is a thematic quality of the game when you get to the cities with other races like elves and dwarves and mages. Like that's like it's a fairly cliche thing, and something that like Dragon Age does all the time, but like with the way that The Witcher does it, you really feel the impact of like the racial segregation and what it does to these people. And it's like there's no good guy in The Witcher. Like Geralt's not a good person. Like he tries his best. He's not a monster, or I mean, depending on how you play him, he basically could be a monster, but he's just trying to get by in the world. He's just trying to find his daughter, which is the overarching plot of the game, and he's just trying to do his job as a Witcher, which is to hunt and kill monsters. But like, he can't fix anyone's problems. He can't save the world, and that's kind of the point of the game in an interesting way, because Ciri, his daughter, who you eventually find at the beginning of the third act, is a character who has like this tremendous magical power because of her lineage, because she's the heiress to this large empire, and she's like, it feels like she is a more conventional fantasy hero, where it's like Ciri's story is one where maybe Ciri could save the world. Like, if she could get her tremendous power under control and learn how to really use it and refine it, maybe she could, like, be the hero that, like, would, like, save this world and be, like, the Gandalf or something like that. But at least the conclusion of my game is, like, she can't be that. She gets restrained by the systems of power in place, and she is forced to basically become the new Empress, and that Geralt has to retire, and that Geralt's not a hero. He can barely save the people that he has around him. He certainly is not someone who can save the world. And so in that way, The Witcher 3 completely, like, avoids a lot of the pitfalls that high fantasy almost always runs into. And so I guess I want to, like, finish this by basically going through what is and explaining my thoughts and feelings and sort of a summary on what is, I think, unquestionably the best part of The Witcher 3. And I think everyone, like, sort of recognizes it, and it's something where it happens relatively early on, and the game peaks there, and I think it's got a lot of, like, really great stuff afterwards. But the Bloody Baron quest, which is a long quest line which spans throughout the Velen section, is, without a doubt in my mind, one of the best things I've ever seen in any media ever. Like, it's something where it humanizes a villainous character in a way that I so very rarely see, where the whole sort of framework of the quest is that you are looking for your daughter Ciri. You know that she came through this one area in Velen, and to sort of investigate it, you're going to talk to the Bloody Baron, who's this guy who rules over this, like, very swampy, very shitty place to live. If you're going to go to the Witcher's world, don't go to Velen. Move to Novigrad. Move to the Skellige Isles. Velen is complete fucking shit. Like, the whole, like, country, like, you can almost smell it. It that place smells like shit. Like, you can just tell. It's so awful. But you go to this, like, really shitty little, like, sort of military camp in the middle of the town with big, like, log walls, and you go and you talk to the Baron, and he says, my wife and daughter have gone missing. If you want me to help you, you have to help me. It's like, that's every video game quest at some point. And so it's like, okay, fine. And the thing I love about Geralt is that he will, because he needs to, he will always be like, okay, I'll do it. But he's always an asshole and reluctant about doing it. He's always just like, because he's always used by the people around him because of his skills, and he's always very, like, resentful about it. And it's a quality that most video game heroes are so, like, naive and innocent and cheerful. It's like, well, of course I'll go find your missing wife and daughter. Like, yes, I will do this. And he's just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I'm doing something really important here. Like, I've got my own business. Like, you just tell me and I'll be on my way. Like, I'll kill a wyvern for you or something. But, like, this is going to be a prolonged thing. He's like, no, I need you to find my wife and daughter. They're missing. And so then, like, Geralt reluctantly acquiesces. And over the course of investigating that plot line, you basically reveal all these sort of things about the Bloody Baron that are sort of, you can tell when you first meet him. But, like, the picture becomes very dark where you realize he's an alcoholic, almost assuredly. And you're pretty sure that he beats his wife. And he maybe beats his daughter. And that's probably that they did not, like, get kidnapped, which is how he sort of presents it at first, that they probably ran away from him. And like, the quest line goes on, and, like, there's a lot of, like, very elaborate stuff, but the main crux of it, that, like, the part that's, like, just sends you into, like, this, like, spiral of sorrow, is that when you have this conversation where once you've sort of figured that out for sure, it's like, this guy definitely beats his wife. I don't know what, like, the situation with the daughter. This guy's definitely a fucking monster. Like, this guy's not cool, and I'm going to confront him about this. And when you do that, you have a long conversation, because one of the other things that you discovered is that, at first I think it's implied that it's because he beats his wife, that she had a miscarriage. You later find out that she aborted the child intentionally. But you believe that, and so then you sort of confront him with that information. And then you have, like, what's probably like a 20-minute conversation with this character sitting in front of this fireplace, where he basically explains who he is, and, like, why he is who he is, and, like, why he needs you to do this. And, like, that character of the Bloody Baron is so completely fleshed out. And he's, like, one relatively small character in the scope of the entire game. But you find out all this stuff, and it feels like it's so well written, it's so well portrayed by the voice actor, and the everything about the scene, like the lighting, the cinematography of it, like, I'll just call it cinematography of it, and, like, everything with, like, the fireplace and the music. is such that you get so drawn into the story about him as like a young soldier who fell in love and went to war and found glory in war, and when he came back he found his wife cheating on him, and in a drunken rage he killed the man his wife was cheating on him with, and they were in this loveless marriage, and like they had a daughter, and like all this stuff, and stuff about how this child that was miscarried, that you later find was actually aborted, was like the thing that he was hoping would be like the thing that he could pin his hopes on, being like, he's constantly trying to reform. Like, and whether you want to believe this guy and forgive him or whatever you want to do with him is up to you as the player. But what he tells you is that he wants to make things better, and that like his hopes were laying on that child. And when he found out that that's what happened, he went into this rage and beat his wife, and then his wife ran away. And then, but the real part of the quest is that after you find that out, you find out that basically, if you want to find the wife and daughter, there are two things that you can do. It's like you can either, like, I think it was like you could make a sacrifice that like using like the you'd have to dig up the fetus and like basically turn it into a monster and like use that to like perform a blood ritual that would allow you to find out where they are. Or you have to dig up the fetus and you have to perform a cleansing ritual that will turn it into a basically this, like, I think a lubberkind is what they call it, a spirit that will guide you to where the wife and daughter are. And that's a much more difficult process because the thing is going to turn, the fetus is going to turn into a botchling, which is a fetal monster that when you read the like diary entry on it or whatever, it is this monster that when a fetus that is not like buried and has proper rites comes back from the afterlife and just kills pregnant women and like feasts on their blood. Really dark, really dark thing. So, and you basically leave it up to this guy and you say, it's like, okay, there are two things we can do. We can dig up this fetus. It's like we can perform this blood ritual thing, and it'll basically send your like unborn daughter's like soul to hell or whatever like this world has. That's probably what it will do, and we'll find your wife. Or we can go through this like long excruciating process that's going to be very emotionally traumatizing for you and try to perform this cleansing ritual and perform it into a guardian lubberkin spirit, and that's what we can do. And he decides to perform the ritual and like sort of go the hard path, but the right path. And that ritual involves finding the monster that's like, it's one of the most horrific character designs I've ever seen. Because when I say it's a monstrous fetus, it is a monstrous fetus. And there's like, that is 100% what it is. And this game is not squeamish. This game is not trying to avoid the gruesome details of that stuff. It is 100% upfront about it. And so he has to take this disgusting monster in his arms while you pacify it with magic, carry it like up this long pathway up to the like threshold of his house, bury it, like say a prayer, give it a name, and then basically stay, like then the Witcher has to stay there and perform this ritual like overnight. And like that's the whole process. And you just do this quest where it's like you're just following him along very slowly while the monster's like becomes agitated and you have to like pacify it with magic or it will rip his fucking throat out. And then you perform this ritual and it's like you just go through this long drawn out like very methodical process with this character, watching him try so desperately to redeem the like unforgivable things that he has done in his past. It's like, you know, everything this guy has done, and you go through that process, and the way that it is tied into this really powerful folkloric element of the game, like with the lubberkins and the botchlings, and like sort of this quality of the mythology of the game that I don't know if in Polish mythology or some other Eastern European mythology that botchling like fetus creature is an actual like folkloric myth, or if they made it up for this game because it's so convincing and the stylistic element of it is so strongly authentic to me that it might as well be like an actual like 1,000-year-old myth or something that some cultures actually observe as a ritual to perform on a miscarried child, where you give it a name and you bury it under the threshold of your house and you say a prayer and that it becomes a guardian spirit for your household. Like that is such an authentic like folklore tale. It's like, and the game is so full of it that's just like one slice of that quest. But then the most heartbreaking thing about that quest is then there's a long drawn out process that I won't go into, but then eventually you basically find out where the mom and the mother and daughter are, and the mother is in a very bad situation with the three witches of the bog that I talked about earlier. And the quest has one or two resolutions. Like one resolution has that you can save the wife and the Baron, and they will go, and the wife will be sort of like traumatized and mentally ill from this experience that she's had with these witches, but she will be alive, and the Baron will take her and like sort of like go over the mountains and like search the countryside for like a doctor that can like help her and fix her. And that's one ending. But to get that ending, you have to basically sacrifice a whole like dozen or so orphan children to these witches, and like their souls will be consumed and they'll be damned to hell eternally. Or you save the orphans, but if you save the orphans, the ultimate consequence, which is what I did, and you don't understand how the consequences of these actions will work out in The Witcher, but you save the orphans, which seems like a pretty good thing to do. The consequences of that are that the witches then become so angry with the wife character that they kill the wife character. And the Baron is there to see it. And so then after this long, and this is like 20 hours of this game that you're constantly revisiting on this quest, and like this long quest line intertwines with another quest line involving those witches and stuff, that eventually over this very long 20-hour like section of the game, and you're doing all these other side quests, it's like after all of that, and like the Baron has been confronted with his dead wife, and you have sort of figured out like the information you need to go to the next place to find Ciri, you ride back up to the Baron's castle to sort of talk to him and sort of say goodbye to him, and when you're riding up, you find him hanging from the tree outside of his palace, basically, and that's the ending to that quest line. It's like, and that's...
What happens to the daughter?
She's kind of okay. I think there's other things that can happen, but she basically leaves. Like in my quest line, she sort of like joins a cult that hunts mages, because it's like there's a lot of other like religious stuff that happens. Yeah,
I just wondered if there was another dark punchline to this story.
There might be. Like, I don't know, like everything. Like, there's a lot of different ways that this game can like play out in subtle ways.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Just sitting here like listening to this story, I'm enraptured by it. And I'm looking up prices on The Witcher on my phone. I need to play this game.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just like that story, like, because it's just that thing where, like, my outcome of that story felt so personal to me, and, like, my relationship to that Baron character is so personal and so complicated. Because it's just something where it's like, you just come away from it feeling like, God damn it, life is just completely fucked. Because this guy was a bad guy. But you learn things about the wife that's like, the wife's not great either. Like, she's not this saint, you know, and like this guy's like has done really inexcusable things in his life, but at the same time, like the extent to which he tries to seek forgiveness and really try to make things right, it's like so hard to try to deny him those things. It's something where, again, it's something that like only video games can do this, where it puts you in that position where it's like, you're the one who has to judge this person. It's not a passive thing for you. Like, you're the one who makes the choice of what to do with him and how to interact with him and how to talk to him. And it's like that really personal experience with a character that's sort of complex and really just messed up. And like the resolution like that's just completely heartbreaking, where everything goes bad. Like, because like you save those orphans, but at the same time, like you never see the benefit of that really. Like, you know that they're alive, that they've escaped, but you never really find them again. Like, you don't know, like they could have all grown up to be fucking serial killers for all I know, with how like things turn out in this world. It's like, and it's stuff like that impact that game can have. And again, like I think that's the best quest line the game has, and it's very long and intricate and has a lot of pieces that like I certainly did not talk about here. But like, this game is full of story moments like that, and full of moments like there's one like moment of the game that's another one of my favorites that's very personal, I feel, to how I play the game, is that there are basically two general love interests you can kind of go with in the game, or you can go with none, or you can try to go with both of them. And there's this character Triss, who's the character I basically went with, and then there's this character Yennefer, who's the character it feels like you're meant to go with, because she has all this history with Geralt from like the books and stuff, because they brought her in from that. And there's a moment where I feel I so very rarely do this in a game, where it's like, where you can very clearly do like the Persona 4 thing or the Persona 3 thing, where you can like go out with all the girls basically, you know. And it's like, and if a game, or Fallout 4 does it as well, it's like if a game lets you get away with going the romantic route without all the characters that you can, it feels like I usually feel kind of almost obliged to in a weird way. It feels like that's the story that like you want to see with those characters, you know. It's like, it feels like, well, it's a lot more interesting for them to become love interests than for them to just be friends most of the time, with how Western stories generally are written. But there's something about like my relationship with Triss, which had developed like through this long quest line, that like I really felt adamant about sticking with her. And the relationship with Yennefer, which like for my Geralt, it was like I felt her relationship was so destructive, because she was this sorceress who is incredibly powerful and is like very sort of power hungry, and is like constantly kind of trying to go on adventures and stuff like that. And she's still living in that world where I was like, Geralt's this guy who's like, he has been doing this for like decades now, because The Witcher has a prolonged lifespan compared to most humans. It's like this Geralt as a character is so beat down. He's so world weary. He has seen so much shit at this point because like you have in the continuity of the character, you have like all these novels that were written, and then after those novels are when the games are set. So then you have 2 games, and you have this game where I've already gone through all this shit and was like, Geralt is not, and I'm not like this guy who's looking to go deeper into this world of like going on adventures, finding these monsters, dealing with this bullshit. Like Geralt's like a guy who wants to get out of this, and just the only reason he's doing this now is to find his daughter, and or his surrogate daughter basically, and that's it, and that's what's pulled him in, is what's pushing him along. And so it's like there's a thematic component to that with the love interest where it's like Triss represents this ability to get out of this life and try to find a way to settle down, and Yennefer represents this like path of where you just go deeper into it and you seek more power and more adventure and more excitement. And there's just this scene where with Yennefer, like you basically break it off with her because the character has this long history with her from the books. And it's like you, through like a long explanation that I won't go into, have been teleported onto a snowy mountainside with a giant pirate ship that had been sunk beneath the waves, and you're sitting with her after like this ridiculous quest line involving a genie and all this stuff, where you basically get to decide which way the relationship goes. And it's like I just had this moment where it's like if I was playing like Mass Effect or I was playing Persona or something, I would pick the dialogue choice. It would be like, well, let's go back to your place and have sex. That's the conclusion to the romantic arc for this game and your character plot. Like, let's go do that one. That would normally be the choice I picked. And I was like, this time I was like, I can't do that because that's not the character that he is anymore. Like this, because it was relatively near the end of the game. It was in like the last 2/3. I was like, at the beginning of this game, that's maybe what I would have had Geralt do and would have felt right. But at this point, like for me, like this character has evolved to the point that I can't like do that. I can't just have fun with the romantic end to this storyline and be like, well, let's do the fun one. It was like, no, I have to be like the one who's like, sorry, Yennefer, but no, like the magic's not there anymore. Like this is over between us. It's like I have to get out of this relationship. It was like the fact that you are able to make those character choices that feel so natural and driven by thematic components of the way that the story has been told from your perspective, and to feel that like I am rewarded as a player for thinking about the thematic component of the game and thinking about the way that this story is told and what this story means to me, and that they are so smart with where you get to make these branching choices that like it's not like every single choice matters. They don't do the telltale thing where at the beginning of the game it's like, this is a story driven by your choices. Your choices matter. Be very careful about your choices. Every single choice you make will be completely revolutionary, change everything about the game. They don't try to like puff it up like that. Most of the time, it's like, no, the choices just like color the dialogue, and that's mostly it. But like the key choices you have to make, like in that Bloody Baron quest, or like when I'm talking to Yennefer, it feels like these choices matter and say something about like who Geralt is and the world that he lives in, and what I think this story should be, and what I feel that the strong thematic components of the story are. And it feels like this is a game driven by my choices, even though most of them aren't like hugely significant choices. It is a game that feels like it's driven by my choices, and I feel like when I get to the end of the game that it is kind of a story I have written. And obviously it's not. Like obviously it's a story that like the game developers wrote, but to so fully convince me of that illusion and bring me along that story with them, that's why The Witcher 3 is my number one game of the year without a doubt in my mind, and one of the best games I've played since I played the Persona games.
Hot damn.
Yeah. Really good. I'm glad that I finally got to like really talk about it on the podcast.
No,
it's been bubbling up for a long time in me.
I'm glad you are too, because even in our personal conversations, like off the air, you've danced around saying certain things about the game, and I totally get why you're saying that, or why you did. But now I feel like giving the full explanation, I feel like I understand the game a little better, and I definitely it's on my list to play at some point, and I haven't found the time to do it. I really want to, and now maybe I'll just have to make the time and do it. Because you've also noted that if other people are intimidated by the length, because it's a big game, you played it over a series of months. Like you didn't.
Yeah, I took several long breaks, like I was talking about with like J-Stars. Is like there are several points in the game, like the end of that Bloody Baron quest is a really good example, where you have long arcs that stretch over big sections of the game, and when you get to the end of them, I think it's like totally natural to like put the game down for a bit, walk away, be like, I'm going to play something else, I'm going to focus on something else, and then come back to this when I'm refreshed. Because, yeah, like I took one break that was like 2 or 3 weeks and like played J-Stars like in that like period and did other stuff obviously, and then came back and was like then like pushed it through to like the other half of the game because I was like more or less split right in the middle of the game for me when I did that.
Well, that's interesting because it's tough for a game to hold your attention across.
Yeah, I've never done that with any game ever. Like I can never take like if I put a game down for like more than a week and I played another game in that time, I'm almost never going to go back to the original game. Or if I do, I'll have to restart it from the beginning.
Right.
But yeah, The Witcher 3 like completely held my attention. Like even when I wasn't playing it, I was still thinking about it and being like, I'm going to play it again. Like I just need to be ready to play it again.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, 2015, hell of a year. Sounds like whether you had a lot of great stuff already, there's even more to catch up on. Very rich year in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So, man. All right. Well, we have podcasted an awful lot for tonight.
Yes, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I feel so cleansed from doing that like Witcher 3 talk. I'm glad I got to have my story time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will be back next week. I think this one I'm going to release on a Monday, and we're going to try to get back to that regular Monday schedule that we've been favoring for the past couple of months. And looking forward to 2016. So many good things we're going to have to talk about this year. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. And like this is going to be a strong year for video games as well. Like Uncharted 4, not far on the horizon.
Not far on the horizon, and Persona 5 at some point, and more Doctor Who at some point, and yeah, it's going to be good.
Any year with more Persona and more Doctor Who is a year that we have to do the podcast. Like it's some law of nature by now.
If we were living in like separate countries, we'd have to figure that out.
Yeah, it was like we would Skype it.
Yeah.
We would fly like once a month, like to like the point in between us to like do a quick like 3-hour podcast and just be like Persona Doctor Who. Okay, let's go back to our lives.
Yeah,
that'd be the bare minimum. But until then, Witcher 3, man. Witcher 3.